My name is Alyssa Maurice from the Hughes Center for Public Policy here at Stockton. The Hughes Center is proud to host this conference in partnership with the Office of the President, Office of Government Relations, and the Council of New Jersey State Colleges and Locals. To begin our program, it is my pleasure to welcome Stockton University's president, Dr. Joe Bertolino.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. All right. Well, first of all, I want to thank you for joining us today. It's always a pleasure to bring folks together to have productive and exciting conversations, particularly now, during a time where higher education is experiencing a series of challenges and a number of questions are being raised about the academy. To our colleagues across New Jersey's public colleges and universities, and to our partners in government and business, and in particular to our guest, Senator Cryan, who is here today. Thank you for being here, Senator. And later on today, I believe Secretary Chalet will be here, our new Secretary of Higher Education. I want to thank you for being here. I want to thank you for your continued support and all that you do, and I want to thank you for helping us to navigate, since it is budget season. I want to thank you for all you're about to do. Just saying. Okay. In any case, it has been an honor to host you for the second annual conference on the power of public colleges and universities. My hope is that we will continue these conversations through the Youth Center. We started this last year and really wanted to begin to engage the community and each other about where we are, what needs to be done in higher education in the state, in particular public higher education, the challenges that we face, the solutions that we can bring together, and how best to move forward. So again, my thanks for being here. We often say at Stockton that we are large enough to influence the region, and yet we are small enough to maintain personal relationships. And that is something that we take a great deal of pride in, because that balance, I think, reflects what public higher education does at its best, particularly at a place like Stockton. When we open doors of opportunity for thousands of students each year, we do so grounded in an ethic of care, I think, that tries to ensure that students are being supported, that they're being seen, that they're being set up for success from the moment they arrive through their entire experience here. So we do this, I think, while staying deeply committed and deeply involved and deeply connected to the communities we serve. I'll share with you that at Stockton, we take a great deal of pride in who we are. We are the public regional university in this part of South Jersey. We are a relatively small teaching college. And yes, we do our fair share of research, and it's great. But at the end of the day, we are an institution that serves students that would otherwise not have an opportunity to go to college. 50% of our students are first-generation college students. 50% of our students are Pell eligible. And I am pleased to say that out of the many institutions in the United States, Stockton is ranked in the top 50 nationally for student success and graduation rates of Pell eligible students. Thank you. Yes, thank you for that. That is important because it is key to the work we do at Stockton. I had the opportunity, I see my friends from the chamber, thank you for being here, New Jersey Chamber. I had the privilege to serve on a panel just a little over a week ago with my colleagues from other higher ed institutions. And I have to confess, I wasn't quite sure what my place was going to be there, because there's little Stockton, and then there's the larger institutions of Rowan, NJIT, Montclair, amazing institutions led by terrific presidents. And it gave me great joy to be able to sit in Atlantic City, where we have a campus, and to share with the community that, look, we may not be an institution that has all the big shiny stuff, you know? Not that I wouldn't take any, Senator. But we are an institution that cares deeply about our students and understands our mission, understands that caring about the individuals that come to this institution, that work at this institution, that are part of this institution, matters in order for them to be successful. Our core here is what is called an ethic of care. What does that mean? That means we have an expectation as an institution, and I have an expectation as president, that we are doing everything possible to treat each other with dignity, respect, kindness, compassion, and civility. Dignity, respect, kindness, compassion, and civility. Those words matter. And my hope is that if we can educate our students to live, work, learn with an ethic of care, dignity, respect, kindness, compassion, civility, and they go out into the world with that core belief, my guess is, given the current state of the world, we'd all be in a better place. Because learning how to engage with one another and learning how to particularly discuss and learn from people who are different than you and who you may not agree with in a civil manner, in a respectful manner, I think matters. And this is important because I recognize the moment that we are in. The challenges facing our sector in higher education, they're real, and they require us to stay steady, to stay focused, and more importantly, to work together. And that's why meetings such as these are important. And so we have been working very hard and are proud to say that we see the impact of our work in several concrete ways. We have a partnership with AtlanticCare, which is our regional healthcare provider, and they're right here on our own campus. And we're preparing, I hope, the next generation of nurses and healthcare professionals and leaders who will serve the South Jersey community. We're expanding our work in artificial intelligence and data science so that our students are not just learning about emerging technologies, but they are using them to solve real problems. And through our public-private partnerships, from our work in Atlantic City to collaborations with local businesses and schools, we're trying to create clear and good pathways from education to meaningful careers. But no institution does this alone. I think that's my phone that's ringing. Yeah, okay. You don't need to answer it. It's fine. Sorry. So my call today is very simple, and here is what I ask of the folks in this room. I invite you to spend today listening very carefully, sharing, engaging openly, and challenging each other. And my hope is that the ideas that we come up with today will turn into action, because the ideas don't mean very much unless we are willing to implement them. And finally, I would ask you to partner with your public universities. I often ask folks in the community to do three things. Number one, talk about their experience at Stockton. Number two, come and visit the institution. Number three, be willing to partner with our institution in ways that allow students to have an experience. And so partnerships matter. And I invite all of you to partner with us and to partner with each other. And by the way, I noticed Jennifer is here from Nijescu. Good to see you. Thank you for being here and for all the work that you do as well. And so with that, I will turn the podium back over. Thank you very much for being here. Welcome to Stockton.
Thank you, President Bertolino, for your remarks and for your leadership. It's now my pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker this morning, Senator Joseph Cryan of New Jersey's 20th Legislative District. Senator Cryan brings a wealth of experience in state government, having served in both the General Assembly and now the Senate, where he currently serves as the chair of the Higher Education Committee. Throughout his career, he has been a strong advocate for expanding access, improving affordability, and strengthening outcomes for students across New Jersey. At a time when higher education is navigating significant challenges and transformation, his perspective is especially valuable. So please welcome Senator Joseph Cryan.
Thank you, Alyssa, for the kind intro. President Joe, thank you for your remarks and thanks for hosting us today. I like President Joe better than the more formal. What do you guys think? Does that work a little better? And good morning to all of you. Thank you so much for taking the time this morning to join us here, and appreciate very much the idea of driving innovation, workforce, and partnerships for New Jersey. And I want to begin by complimenting on some of the innovations, and President Joe said, partnerships and innovation are what's important moving forward. I think in higher ed, for all the challenges that we have, and they are significant, that we need to realize that there are so many good things happening that we don't take credit enough, and I wanted to begin with that. I think about just the recent TCNJ Princeton partnership, just announced, look, Carrie, big smile on your face there, right, Carrie? You can go ahead and give a big smile on that one, right? I think about FDU and Rowan and their healthcare partnerships that are innovative and looking across geographical lines. I think about right here with Atlantic and Stockton coming together for more, Atlantic Cape, I should say, and I apologize for that. Ramapo and Thomas Edison, and I can go on and on. Folks are looking at different ways as to how higher ed can contribute and make a difference in a community. And I think we need to focus in and realize innovation happens here. And while we have more to do, that we have a lot to be proud of, and that innovation and those partnerships that you referenced in your opening remarks are going to continue to be a trademark here in New Jersey. Because in New Jersey, we need to find our purpose and to define it a little better. And when I heard President Joe speak about the mission of Stockton College, it was refreshing to hear, because sometimes I think folks question whether we have a mission. And they question whether or not we truly understand where we're going. And those remarks helped us feel in that purpose, and I appreciate that very much. So it's an honor to be here with you all. Most of my remarks today are going to focus on AI, because I noticed the two panels are going to discuss artificial intelligence, and I thought that would be appropriate. I would begin with the annual challenge of the budget. And one of the things you learn as a senator, as soon as the governor announces a budget, that unless everybody gets 125% of what they want, you become vitally important, much more beautiful, and much more intelligent till June. And then you go back into your cocoon after the budget is adopted and you can put your weight back on and not worry about who's looking at you. It is part of the season, and I know for some of us in the sector, whether we were flat, which we all understand with growing costs, inflation, whether it be gas, most importantly, healthcare, salary, and the rates, that those challenges are significant. Be very clear, I continue to be an advocate in terms of what we can do to ensure that this governor understands that the economic investment of higher education has an ROI that is stronger than any other sector in the economy in New Jersey. I believe that wholeheartedly, and will continue to advocate as such, and we will continue to utilize the committee to command that forum and to make sure that that platform is continued to be understood not only by 120 legislators, but by one governor as well. And I thank many of you who I know are partners with that and speak often to the front office, as we say, to the executive branch, but also lobby my fellow members in terms of the importance of what we do. So I wanted to thank you for having me today, and just to kind of transition we all know that higher ed is the nimble area. It's where you create the community partnerships. It's where you train. It's where you do your workforce. It's where you're able to adjust, whether it's in healthcare or AI or others. But those come with challenges. And I'd like to speak to you a little bit about what those challenges are. And when we consider artificial intelligence, I don't know if any of you do this. I hope you have a better life than I do. But on Sunday morning, the news shows become part of my world. Need to hear what's going on, right? I see some of you smiling, right? So yesterday morning, I clicked on CBS Sunday Morning, the show I like, but I never seem to watch enough. But there was a discussion about a community in Pennsylvania, Archibald Township, which I had never heard of before yesterday morning. And beautiful, bucolic, northeastern Pennsylvania, all sorts of woods. And it reminded me, and I added this into this talk, because driving down here and looking at all the woods, I got to tell you, living in Union, New Jersey, we're very envious. All right. But watching it, and these two citizens who have organized against AI data centers, because there was, if you hadn't seen the report, numerous investments in AI and data centers going on in Archibald, and they literally were showing the removal of trees and how different the valley was going to look in the mountain, that the trees wouldn't be there. And yet, the senator for the state of Pennsylvania was arguing about the economic investment and how important the data centers can be and the need for them and the potential of jobs created and so on. And it drew me at its very core of the challenges that we have, both as a culture, as a society, and how we move forward. And as we know here in New Jersey as well as anybody, those challenges include higher electricity costs at the moment, that I will tell you, as somebody who has the honor of representing 230,000 people, I'm hearing from the true hurt of what those costs mean in terms of a family budget, in terms of whether or not they can sustain and keep it real. So those challenges are much more than just what I'm about to talk about in terms of colleges. They're challenges for a community. They're challenges for all of us in a society. And I would invite you, if you didn't get a chance, look at the report. I think it really encapsulates the AI debate in terms of a community very, very well, at least the data center portion of it. And by the way, it affects in my district too. I represent the city of Elizabeth. If you've landed in Newark Airport, you have landed in the city of Elizabeth. 2/3 of the airport is actually in Elizabeth. People don't realize that. Union and a borough of Kenilworth. And why do I mention that? Well, because there's a new data center going there. And why would I mention that? Because $250 million of your tax dollars are providing tax credits for it. And I don't think people realize that the state of New Jersey has a strong economic push behind these as well. And when I tell that to people, generally I get a horrified look of, wait a minute, you mean I'm paying for higher electric rates, both coming and going? And I smile and say, yes, you are. And then I take the smile off my face because people aren't too happy when they hear it. We have to figure this out as a society in terms of what we do, which leads us to the challenges of what we do here on the academic front. The Higher Education Committee, we held a hearing on artificial intelligence just a few weeks ago. And to me, it was stunning. I heard from folks, a couple folks from Rutgers in particular, but one gentleman who spoke who's been on AI for decades and certainly had the platform and the credentials to speak of it, who said, you don't understand, the classroom in 15 or 20 years is not going to look like it is today. There will not be grades 2, 3, and 4, those sort of things. We are going to teach young people what they don't know as opposed to what they know. We are going to focus in on what their passions are and work to that, as opposed to the way we operate today with just a standard pass-fail type of thing. It was a fascinating discussion. He indicated, for example, and some of you are already dealing this with the challenges of your classrooms, whether they be in higher education or any other place. He said, who's going to answer the question in the classroom? Is it going to be a professor? Is it going to be an adjunct? Or is it going to be a bot? And what's going to be the most efficient way to do that? And what's going to be the most economical way to do that? And those sort of questions kind of stay in my mind in terms of the future. You can think about that paradigm. You can say, well, that's ridiculous, or maybe 15 years is too fast. But I will remind you that 10, 15 years ago, we weren't really talking about artificial intelligence at all, were we? Right? We were just happy that dial-up didn't happen anymore. right? Or that our iPhone worked. So from an academic, with all of us as we talk about these things, we all feel the challenges of that. How far can AI take us? What are the guardrails? Will we be safe? Right? Will it control us? And the thing I use often in these discussions is, if we don't move now to control artificial intelligence, then ultimately it will control us. So we need to be ahead of it. And I do have some statistics that show that. But as we think about that, I think about things like deep fakes. Right? Have any of us ever watched it? We used to think if we saw a video, it was absolute truth, right? Right? And I used to be the sheriff of the county that I have the privilege of living in. And people would say, well, it's on video, it's absolute certainty. And then today when we look at a video, for many of us, the first thing we question is it AI or is it real? Right? Have any of you ever done that with a video in the last 24 hours? Right. The invasions of privacy, the energy demand I mentioned. All the things that go with this are going to be our challenges. But from an academic perspective, AI possesses, at least to me, a significant challenge to academic integrity. It puts into question the originality and authenticity of the student work. Any of your students use ChatGPT? Anybody? Anybody at all? I'm sure none of your students use ChatGPT. No one's heard of Claude. No one knows what Grok is, right? And we tease about it a little bit. But we think about those challenges as what they are, and they're very real, right? They're using them now to generate whole essays, right? Students, how they engage with reading. Rather than fully reading through something, just utilizing the ChatGPT summary and then taking those and generating those summaries for real work. And while it might streamline work, and that's important, I think how a student engages, let's think about literature. Do you understand literature through a ChatGPT summary? No, of course you don't. And that critical thought that goes with it and understanding the value in the words and what they mean. So for those of you here, for the partnerships that we want, these are the kind of challenges and critical thought that I think are going to make this world significantly different in how we handle it. And how we define what we do is going to be a significant thing. I mentioned to you with your students, John Bramnick and I, Senator Bramnick, we do this civility tour, which is why I was so impressed, President Joe, when you talked about dignity and respect. So we've been to a bunch of campuses. Bramnick talks a lot more than I do. All right, to put it mildly. But I always ask the students the same thing. How many of you use artificial intelligence in your research and your work? College, every hand goes up, right? Just as we did here, and there's no shyness to that. But then I ask them, how many of you are worried about whether artificial intelligence will take your job coming out of college? And just about every hand goes up as well. Those fears and that debate are so significantly real. But for us, the ability to handle both of those process and how we do it is going to define our success, in my opinion, over the next 10 to 15 years. And while there are concerns in the academic piece that we know about how AI works, I think we're going to have to figure out our ethics education. I think we're also going to have folks understand, here's your guardrails, here's where it is, and what you can do. But education today also describes in AI not just the student experience, but the workforce experience. Right? In the same hearing that I mentioned to you, and I'm going to transition over to workforce development, which I know is part of this, a professor from, I believe he's a professor, doctor anyway, from Rutgers, whose name I forgot to write down, but I'm pretty sure it's Davis. I don't want to be a plagiarism guy here coming out of the gate. But he had talked about, when he presented to the committee, he talked about a survey that he did. 40% of those that work in the workforce today indicated that they interact with AI each and every day. Think about that number. 40%. Significant, right? I had to think about it in terms of what, during the day, I run a utility authority. All right, and I had to take it for a couple minutes, but all our SCADA, all our things that actually run this facility, they're all now built on an AI platform. And I thought to myself, well, you know what? I have 260 plus employees, and probably 190 of those would have to answer that question, yes. And it didn't even cross my mind until he put that in. So I think those things and those parameters, but he indicated not only the 40% that utilize AI each day, but he indicated as a premise that we should realize that AI can give us productivity gains in each and every part of the process that we do if we embrace it correctly, that those users can in fact be more productive. On a self, again, using self as an example, my employees are more productive. When the SCADA reports are working well, they can move on to the next item and the next part of the agenda. So, but yet we fear it today. And the other is that states with highly educated workforces will be the winners, will be the successors in the AI fight. And I thought that premise was most important because in New Jersey, thank you, President Joe, thank you to all of you, you provide the most highly educated workforce in the United States as a state. So we are deeply well positioned and able to adjust accordingly to what we can do. But how we do it? Well, those are the debates that we need to have. You know, we provide skills when you move into the public-private partnerships and the debates on workforce development. You know, internships are key opportunities that provide real-world knowledge, and those skill sets are where you all need to become and are a bit nimble. I do want to mention one. I know Margo's doctor is going to be here. Margo's going to be here a little later. The second, you know, OSHI offers the Career Accelerated Internship Grant Program, which helps align higher education with labor market needs. And the grant program provides direct funding to New Jersey-based employers who host state college students over the summer. And the programs are mutually beneficial. Some of you take advantage of this, I hope, along the way. And we need to do more of this. We need to be able to not only provide that next level for interns and for the graduates, but we also need to understand that we've got other adjustments to make. You know, the Labor Committee, Senator Singleton's bill 3214, just provides tax credits to business that hired paid apprentices and paid internships. It's nice to see the BIA and I agree on something where we can move on things. And it's the type of work that we need to continue to do. And I also want to mention our challenges with workforce Pell Grants. So all of you have seen this, right? I'm preaching to the choir here as I watch so many heads go up and down. You know, the federal Pell Grants now can cover short-term, post-secondary programs, workforce Pell. It's one of the initiatives I think makes a lot of sense for us in terms of what we can do and with the changing economy and the changing techniques that we have. But we need to do more in New Jersey. We need to develop that legislation that works for it. And I'm asking each and every one of you to weigh in. All right, I can ask Jen Maloney, but I know she will. All right, but I'm asking each and every one of you if you have ideas in terms of how this can work better for your institution, for your university, for your college. Please let us know as we continue and begin that process more earnestly now in terms of developing what we need to do and how we need to finish it up. So, and I also want to take a moment, I want to thank the New Jersey Council of County Colleges. You guys have spearheaded with BIA and with the Pathways to Career Opportunities program that reflects that kind of work that I'm speaking about today. I don't want to go on too long, but New Jersey's got a significant investment and partnership with AI, much more so than what I've mentioned. Many of you are familiar with the HACS, right, which is in Newark. That's the pre-seed. That's the the hard tech startup. That's with NJIT and Princeton and Rutgers. Many of you familiar with the Helix? That's in New Brunswick. I see the heads nodding as well. Obviously, there's many more of those partnerships that I can speak about, but the Helix is, 12 stories, 73,000 square feet. And there are a number more of these, right? The AI Hub in Princeton. I can go on and on. We are in a position to adapt importantly, and we are in a position to make AI work for us, which is part of the premise of this discussion. But how we do it requires us being in that innovation and partnership that we need to continue, that we define legislation that supports your work, that puts us in a position to be able to do so. And finally, just let me close with this, is that there's a lot on the agenda today, but the future of higher ed in this state, we all have an obligation here, and it's critically important. If I could, frankly, tape President Joe's speech, I'd use it everywhere I could. So many times I hear now from parents, I do a lot of high schools, all right, and try to, because let's face it, that's our next wave and what we're doing. I'm not sure they're going to college. I hear from parents that have had a student in their family or a child in their family already go, say, I'm not sure I'm sending her or him. I went to an advanced placement celebration where you would think everybody's going to the next higher ed university and what will it be, and I actually had a student say to me, I'm just not sure I'm going. Right. We've got challenges in terms of what we market and what we do. And we all know the statistics, right? The ROI, the generational changing of a college education, first in my family to achieve a college degree. Things matter when we allow students to have that opportunity. We need to figure it out on a stronger level in terms of cost value and the way we message, right? We need to get out there more to the folks that matter, because I can tell you out there, and you all know this better than I ever will, parents are questioning considerably whether or not these investments are worth it to them. We know that they are, but we need to make sure that we message it and understand it better. I will be with you in that part of the role and any other part that I can play, because the challenges that we have only allow us to grow better and stronger in the future. And I think all of you understand that. I know you know it, but together we can continue to create, in my opinion, the greatest state economy in the country in terms of being flexible, have opportunities for young people, and that's because of the work you do. It's a privilege to be with you today, and I hope you enjoy your conference. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Cryan, for your insight and for a perfect primer into our panels of the day. We're going to now transition into our first panel discussion. So I'd like to invite our panelists who will be speaking about AI to join me on the stage. Artificial intelligence is rapidly reshaping nearly every sector, from education and workforce development to governance and civic life. This interdisciplinary panel will examine how AI is transforming higher education, the ethical and policy considerations it raises, and how institutions can adapt to prepare students for an increasingly technology-driven world. The panel will be moderated by Dr. Tina Zappilli, Hughes Center Director and Associate Professor of Political Science at Stockton. So please join me in welcoming our moderator and panelists.
Thank you. And truly, I feel like we shared all of our notes with the senator. He really teed both of our panels up so well. So to get started, I'd actually like the panelists to introduce themselves. And if you'd like to share about 30-second preview of your initial thoughts on AI, and we'll get right into the questions. And we'll go ahead and start right next to me. Thank you.
Hello. Good afternoon. Good morning, everyone. Marie Pryor. I am the Director of Workforce at the New Jersey AI Hub, where I lead Microsoft's TechSpark program. And so the AI Hub, as Senator Cryan mentioned, is a public-private partnership with Microsoft, CoreWeave, Princeton University, and the State of New Jersey Economic Development Authority. And we exist to make sure that New Jersey leads in this AI moment. And so we are tasked with driving AI innovation in education and workforce, in scientific discovery and research, as well as supporting the startup community throughout the state of New Jersey as it relates to AI. And so I have so many thoughts about the role that public institutions play in that, and there's been some of our key early partners in this work, including the New Jersey Council for County Colleges, as well as many of our four-year higher institution institutions here in New Jersey that we're bringing together regularly to discuss these issues and work through them at scale.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Gavin Rozzi. I am the inaugural director of the Division of Housing and Community Resources Data Center at the Department of Community Affairs in Trenton. And my work is kind of at the nexus between housing policy and technology modernization in state government. So I'm kind of in the thick of it in terms of bringing a lot of these emerging technologies into government in a way that can benefit New Jersey residents while also prioritizing some of those guardrails and safety considerations. So my office leads an integrated civic technology practice. We do everything from digital transformation, moving paper-based forms and processes into the digital age. And we also created, which I'm very proud of, one of the only in-house software engineering teams in state government. So we work very closely to try to bring these technologies into government in a way that allows us to continue serving our constituents, but doing that safely and responsibly. Thank you.
We're here to talk about technology, but can we turn our microphone on? I guess. My name is Kevin Michaels, and I'm a faculty member. I'm a professor in the School of Business at the College of New Jersey, where I direct the Center for Innovation and Ethics. And that juxtaposition is increasingly intriguing, I think, for all of us, right? The opportunity to create, drive change, inspire new and amazing paths that help others. And the relationship between that and ethics is ever more interesting, right? Because AI is this incredibly powerful tool, but as the senator said, it's also this really troubling threat if it's not something we understand and maintain autonomy over. So we think a lot about those questions, and the challenge, I think, for me, is to drive a conversation that has some nuance, less about viewing it as an enemy or as the palliative for all problems, but perhaps as an understanding as this great tool that also needs deep reflection on what it means for our future.
No button on this one. Greg Williams from the State AFL-CIO Education Director. I want to say a little deep history, which is that the entire labor movement owes its existence to technological change, the Industrial Revolution of the early 19th century, in which enormous increases in productivity occurred, and workers were just plain displaced and got very little benefit out of that until there was a labor movement that addressed how the benefits of that increased productivity were distributed. I think we're faced with a much more complicated version of that issue now, cognitive labor. How do we do that? But my feeling is one of the key things is going to be keeping people in the loop, that they make the final decisions. And that means we don't need lower levels of education. We need higher levels. We need a level of sophistication that you understand what these programs are doing. And that's where higher education is going to be really critical. And we want to collaborate with higher education on that. So there'll be more.
Can you hear me?
Can you hear me now? Okay. My name is Jo Formicola. I'm Professor Emerita of Political Science at Seton Hall University. I've just finished a book entitled Academia's Dilemma, What to Do About AI. And so I am a person in the trenches who deals with it every day, especially in my seminar for graduation. So I'm going to talk from the professor's point of view.
And the mics actually do just take a second to turn on, so they're all active and on. So you're all set. Thanks to our amazing production services team in the back as well. All right.
Testing. Oh.
Yep. So we'll get to our first question. Yep. We're good. We'll get to our first question. From your vantage point, academia, government, labor, or industry, where do you see the biggest gap between how AI is developing and how higher education is responding? And we can go ahead down in the same order for this question, I think.
Yeah, thank you for that question. So I sit representing industry. However, by virtue of the work that I'm doing in New Jersey, steeped across our public and academic institutions who we're bringing in as early partners in this work. And so the gap that I see, well, first let me start with everyone's trying their best. Everyone's really making a good and righteous attempt to meet this moment. And for some, that means going really fast and adopting quickly. And for others, it means going slow, taking their time, being deliberate, and being critical about AI's impact in their space. And everyone's doing that for the right reasons. The gap that I see, though, does deal with speed of adoption, and really a difference in operational tempo. And so AI is iterating and being iterated on weekly. And at an exponential rate, and in our academic institutions and our industry, in some cases, the speed of adoption is much different. And so in an academic setting, right, we measure things in terms of semesters, academic calendars, the time that it takes to formulate a committee, to consider a new curriculum, a new degree track, the time it takes to meet and vote on that, and then implement that a following semester. And so when we're talking in terms of those time frames, we'd already be 8 or 10 cycles behind the AI version that we were talking about when we first looked to develop that curriculum. And so to meet this moment, the AI Hub is working with 11 of the 38 colleges around the state of New Jersey to bring them together monthly in a working group where they iterate and co-design and co-develop curriculum together, as well as addressing university governance and academic integrity policies. And so we're doing this because every institution is making progress down one of those avenues, whether it's their hyper-technical degree tracks, whether it's their humanities, social sciences, or whether it's their governance policies, but no one's doing it all. And so by bringing them together, how can one institution offer up, here's the thinking and the great work that we've done on our academic integrity policies and our governance frameworks and our fair use policies. And hey, that's a really nice, shiny computer science curriculum, let's share. And so we're bringing them together to help be more nimble. And the last thing I'll say on this in terms of meeting the speed of the moment is we need to rethink the ways in which we approach these decisions. And so, for instance, the time that it takes to build out a new curriculum, a new degree track, those are deliberate lengths of time that those things take and the thought required to go behind it. But in order to meet this moment and not do a disservice to our students who are graduating next semester, next year, how can we infuse practical, responsible AI curriculum now? And so we're doing that through nimble modules, new assignments, new assessments that can be infused into existing courses versus waiting for an entire course, an entire AI elective to be developed. How do we benefit the students that are in our institutions right now and making sure that we don't create this gap for them as they enter the workforce in the next 12 to 18 months?
I appreciate the question, and I think one of the biggest challenges that we have to all grapple with in meeting this moment is just how fast these things are evolving. I think it's every week or so now you see a new AI model coming out or new security concerns coming from just how fast these things move. So I do agree. I think everybody really is trying to move at their own pace to meet these challenges, but I think from my perspective, from the government side of things, I think the big gap that I see is this tension between who is moving proactively and who is moving reactively. I think we've seen a lot more momentum on the proactive side in the last year or so, but I think we've seen, and not to name any specific institutions, but I think the big challenge is we all don't want students doing their essays on ChatGPT and then not engaging with the material. However, educators really have had to deal with the on-the-ground realities of everybody's using it to some extent, so how do we govern it? And I think one of the concerns that I have had in that respect is if you look at, from an academic integrity standpoint, it's very easy to throw something up on Canvas or a learning management system to try to detect AI-generated content. But the challenge is there's significant equity considerations with something like that. There's folks that are disabled, English may not be their first language, or they're relying on assistive technology, and they're kind of falling into the clutches of these academic integrity situations where they're being looked at as if they may have plagiarized. And that's not to say we should, not enforce academic integrity, but I think to meet this moment, it's going to require us to think about things a little bit differently and think about how some of these automated systems that we're using to detect AI content can be amplifying some of these larger structural inequities. So, with some of the work that we've done at DCA, we've tried to start small, scaling up in smaller sprints where we can use AI as a plus, not as a substitute for that human in the loop and the human thinking, but as a thinking partner. And it's going to require all of us to meet this moment by opening our minds to some of these new possibilities while also staying true to our roots and ensuring that integrity is at the core.
Intriguing thoughts, yeah, and I am not only intrigued by the comments from both of our panelists thus far, but to add to it, I think there's a real variety of responses, of course, on the AI front across academia, and where I am at TCNJ, our response has been pretty quick, and we've moved with dispatch to get faculty up to speed, to make sure they're kind of knowledgeable about their views, whether to embrace or resist or whatever that is, so that it's informed. I think that's at the very least what we need to ask of faculty. But for me, the more interesting question goes well beyond that. For me, the really interesting question is not to embrace or resist or any of that, but to ask the really deep philosophical questions about the role of colleges and universities in a world where information transfer may no longer be our central value. That's a strong statement, but we know that these AI tools are very powerful tutors, right? They can answer your questions specifically, and they can ask your follow-up questions, and they can understand a lot about where your deficiencies are as you go. And the results from one-on-one tutoring are often better than the results of a big classroom for student outcomes. So the more interesting question is, where does that leave institutions of higher education? And for me, the really compelling answer is information, foundation, transfer, all that matters. All those foundational understandings matter. But at the end of the day, the really extraordinary opportunity may be problem solving, creating new paths, customizing new outcomes, thinking about creating an entire generation of people who are much more in the creative space, who have the critical thinking capacities to use these tools where augmented with the tools, we are more powerful to create and solve problems and create new products and services in ways we never could before. In other words, there's an opportunity to lead into this new path here, rather than viewing it as, well, let's just find a way to bolt it onto our old model. And that model intrigues me ultimately as a possibility for higher ed to be transformed in an extraordinary way. Could we be creating builders, innovators, creators of new paths, new knowledge at a rate we never could before? And I'll leave with one closing thought on this question, which is, I teach a course in innovation, and when I invite students to create a solution of their own, they catch on fire. They're working on a problem that interests them. They become interdisciplinary. They become self-learners. They figure out how to solve problems that never intrigued them before. And at the end of the exercise, they're almost the model student you want. They've gone from passive to active, to engaged, to seeking after new possibilities. So I see this bot revolution as an opportunity for us to transform who we are in a very exciting way.
Thank you for the question. In this question, I am not in higher education, so I'm more listening, and I find what I'm hearing here is really worthwhile, particularly like the idea that you're doing in-house state data processing and such, rather than putting it all out there. But I would say that this whole question of the time it takes to do new curriculum and so forth, that's valuable. I mean, the one thing that the machines are never going to do is put value on what is important, what are we trying to do, and that there's no way to do that. That's deliberation. That's human deliberation, and we've got to keep that part in it. So I'm going to come back to that again on some of the other questions, but I'll defer my time again for now.
I have been a high school teacher for 5 years. I've been a university professor for 40 years. I've taught thesis writing for those entire 40 years. I myself have written 12 books, close to 40 peer-reviewed articles. I am on the editorial board of a number of journals, et cetera. And when I teach, I don't teach what to think. I teach how to think. It's a totally different thing. I teach process. And I don't know that the machine necessarily is teaching process. I think AI is giving us an unbelievable amount of information quickly, accurately, and we can use it. And so when I'm teaching thesis writing, I tell students it's fine to use AI. Go there, get your information, get your stats, get your data, get your arguments, get your sources, et cetera. And when you have all that and you present your research question and your hypothesis and your research design, I'm going to ask you one question. And that one question is, So what? Okay? What does it all mean? And I am committed to the fact that we as professors or individuals who work in AI and business and whatever have to be looking at this from a very, very different perspective. What we can do as teachers is teach to higher levels of thinking. We have the obligation to teach analysis, synthesis, extrapolation, so that we arrive at critical thinking. Students have got to learn critical thinking so that they can make decisions that are beneficial not only to themselves and their professions, but to society as well. And that's the thing that is our responsibility. And so for the rest of the day, I'm going to talk about returning to what I call humane pedagogy. And so I'll get into that a bit later.
Thank you. And you all raised a lot of good points about the gaps in higher ed. I just returned from an international college conference where the gaps are exacerbated across borders as well. So we see a lot of rapid change happening at the country level with our students' counterparts around the world. So they're having very different experiences in the classroom and the workplace with AI and technology too. So I'm going to jump ahead a little bit to talk about guardrails, since several of you brought this up. As AI systems become more integrated into decision-making, what guardrails should institutions adopt to ensure transparency, accountability, and fairness? So again, guardrails and decision-making. And I'll leave this one open. We can go down the aisle again here, but if anybody would really like to kick us off.
So I'll jump in. I think this is a really important question. And I think, the biggest thing that I would say people need to avoid getting tripped up on is emphasizing form over substance. We all talk about having a human in the loop, which I think is really essential for any type of decision making. But I think we need to have a human in the loop in a thoughtful sense where they're actually meaningfully contributing to the decision. If you're just auto-approving everything that an AI is sending you, it's very easy to be misled. And I think one of the concerns that we've seen, especially as we've looked at some of the consumer safety issues with some of the large commercial AI providers, is they can almost be very deceptive. They tell you what you want to hear, and it learns off of your own kind of interests and idiosyncrasies. And it's something that we really have to be careful about. So I think, in my work in particular, I have to operate within the confines of the state IT environment. We have to follow all OIT, OHSP guidelines. And I can say, particularly in the Murphy administration, we've seen a lot of progress in terms of the state starting to develop this body of policy. All state employees are all required to go through the same AI training. There's been some great work done with integrating AI and human-centered design by the New Jersey Innovation Authority under the leadership of Dave Cole. So I think a lot of it is just kind of taking a step back and thinking what it is that we really want to do in the first place. And what we have done, we often use AI at DCA to model different scenarios, especially, if we were to lose X amount of dollars from a federal funding situation, what would we see the effects of that downstream? And we've used AI to model a lot of these scenarios, especially like as we prepare legislative briefings and other public-facing materials. But what we're not doing is we're not just putting the AI in the driver's seat and running with that. We are kind of thinking slow and thinking fast and using those outputs to guide human decision making, but ultimately those management decisions are being made by a person. I think if you see some of the stuff, there's been some battles going on with the Department of Defense and Anthropic, the company that makes Claude. They didn't want to open up their system to allow it to just autonomously start making decisions of strikes on military targets, which I think is obviously the right call. But it's going to be one of these types of things where we have this gray zone of institutional constraints as well as individual actors trying to push the envelopes where things move so quickly. I think these governance questions and these guardrails are something that we're going to have to continue to be very intentional about, lest the systems end up, getting out of control with some of these other examples we've seen lately.
Joe, go ahead.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And frankly, I think one of the things that's critical for students, in fact, for all of us to really reflect on, is what AI does well and what it doesn't do well. And it would be nice if we had kind of a clear categorical understanding of those distinctions. There will be obviously borderline cases and challenges to make that distinction crisp and clear. But for me, the question of human judgment remains very much ours, and maybe that should sound almost tautological in the sense that, well, of course, that's human judgment. But I know a lot of people who are turning to these tools for life advice, for decision making, that kind of thing. And the really interesting, important decisions are the hard choices in life, and they typically entail trade-offs between competing values, which often means that you select one at the expense of the other. They're not only decisions involving levels of uncertainty, but also a competition between what we value most in the world. And the idea that an AI device can do that strikes me as just wrong-hearted or foolish, and largely because it's a language predictive model. And why would we expect that to map onto our values? But more importantly, the questions that are really challenging in life that require human judgment require us to really engage with the detailed matrix of facts that are before us. They can't be pre-stated based on what's happened before. So being able to infer from prior instances is only marginally useful in new, factually sensitive decisions that we face in life. So the most important questions that we all face need to remain the ones that we reserve to ourselves. And I think students need to understand that there's no reason to expect that a bot can answer the deep human judgment questions that entail value trade-offs and require us to extemporize about, hey, what do we want to be in the world? That's the most foundational question we humans face, and it can't be any question for anyone other than ourselves, I think.
Very good. On guardrails, transparency, accountability, fairness, this is at the very heart of the labor movement. And you have to look a bit here. Just context here, only 10% of the private sector workforce is in the union. You have a whole outlook that's very entrenched that goes back to the Treaty of Detroit of 1950 when the United Auto Workers came up with major increases in benefits and wages, but the management was exclusively on the management side, this bifurcation. Well, what's happening is that this is becoming, with AI and so forth, to actually account for this, you have to know how the AI works. You have to have transparency on decisions that are made that affect employees. You have to have some means of dealing with incorrect information or unfair information. And that can't be predetermined. It's probably collective bargaining is the way to go. But that's just one aspect. The other aspect of AI that really hits the workplace is surveillance. And I want to come back to surveillance later, but there's going to have to be, if you're going to have humans in the loop, most of the humans in the workplace are the employees. And how are the employees going to have a voice in how these things are done? And that has to be put on the table, I think, to have this work meaningfully in a beneficial way.
Okay, I'm going to go against what everybody is saying here, because I am an employee of my university, okay? But I want to talk about what it means to be an authentic person in a classroom and what authenticity is versus artificial intelligence. So we give a senior thesis course that you have to pass in order to graduate. And it's very tightly woven insofar as it's kept at a level of 10 to 12 people in a class with a professor. It is not taught remotely. It is taught in person. Why? So that a professor and a student can have a relationship. Students can have relationships with each other. There is peer review. There is professorial review of every part of the development of the thesis. And this brings together what I like to consider at the end of the course, a scholarly community. In my particular section, you cannot bring a computer. You cannot bring a cell phone. You can't bring any digital AI glasses or whatever people are using these days. You can only bring a pen or a pencil and a notebook. And that means that everybody has to talk to everybody else about their research, how they're doing it, what their hypothesis is, how are they getting to it, how are they going to prove it, can't they prove it? And every single time that we meet, this is what we do. We keep a folder, and in the folder we write down what the research question is, what the hypothesis is, what the research, what the research design is going to be, and then together we work on the analysis, which is what takes the longest amount of time, trying to explain to each other what is it that we found and why does it matter, so that we take what we are doing to a much higher level. Now, I'm not looking at people who are looking at a screen. I had a girl the other day, when the class was over, she held up her cell phone and she said, "Thank you, Dr. Formicola. I just missed 79 texts." That was in an hour and a half. Now, how can somebody learn anything when they're looking at their cell phone reading 79 texts? And so my argument is, yes, we can use AI, but AI needs to be our helper. AI has to be our tool. And students have to learn how to use this tool. And that's our responsibility. And that only happens when we talk to each other, when we communicate with each other. When class was over, I spent an extra half an hour with a student who was working on his analysis, who was going around and around and around the mulberry bush. And we actually were writing on the blackboard, erasing things, changing things, until by the time he left, he knew what he was actually going to be analyzing. And so I love AI. I use it myself every day. I'm writing, as I said, I just finished one book, I'm working on something else. I use it every day, but I use it to gather information. I get data, I check it out. But in the end, it's my brain that's in charge of it, not their brain that's in charge of me. And so that's what I try to get across to my students. Don't be afraid of it. Don't be afraid to adapt to it. Don't be afraid to use it, but let it help you and help your students instead of it controlling you. So I'll go in further as we get along. Okay.
Question, because the one on guardrails is really important. And so, want to emphasize everything that was said. Absolutely, AI should not be deciding anything. It should always be a human. And so AI is a tool meant to act at a human's direction, and the human is meant to interpret the inputs and ultimately be the actor to whom which we would hold accountable for any decisions that may be AI informed. It's also incredibly important when we're talking about higher risk use cases, and simply put, anyone which life, liberty, their pursuit of happiness or safety would be at jeopardy or at the end of that outcome need to be held to a much higher burden of review. Perhaps sometimes AI is not appropriate in some of those scenarios, and making sure at all times that human accountability is there, to answer for any of those decisions. And also on fairness and disparate impact, right? Those are not static factors. And so it's not something we address at the beginning when we decide to use a tool or implement it or roll it out, that we evaluate one time. It must be constantly evaluated and reevaluated. And it might mean that at a certain point, a tool that we thought was appropriate is no longer. And we have to hold space for that and be intentional about that.
Thank you. And many of you have already addressed a question about the skills that we want our students to learn, but I'll go ahead and throw this out there if anyone would like to add. So there is obviously concern about reliance on AI eroding some of our basic skills, whether that's us in the workplace or our students in the classroom. I think both are true. What skills should higher education prioritize to prepare students for an AI-driven economy or field of study? And how can our institutions strike the balance between technological fluency and being adept at learning these tools with foundational critical thinking? And again, I know you've already shared a little bit on this question, so we'll keep talking about this and then we'll shift over to AI in the workplace.
Okay, I think we have to realize one thing. AI is a business, okay? Big tech is a business. There are thousands of colleges in the United States, and it is a lucrative market for the AI business, okay? Now, you have a system at your university. I don't know what your system is. We happen to have Microsoft. ChatGPT is on there. We get all kinds of stuff. Whether you want it or not, it's there, okay? And the school pays for it. And they make every university feel if you don't have this, you are behind progress. Your students aren't going to get good jobs when they leave because they're not on top of things, et cetera. But you have to continually remember that AI is a business. A university is not a business in the same way, okay? Our business is the knowledge business. Our business is preparing people to be able to go out into the world and be successful at a career, to be happy as human beings, and to make some sort of a contribution to the world. We are not in the business in the same way that OpenAI is, or Gemini, Google, or any of these other companies. That's the first thing we have to remember, that our goal is a very different goal. Can we do it without AI? I don't think so anymore. I think we have to learn to adapt to it. If you look at somebody like Piaget, who talks about how children learn things, okay? The first thing they do is they have a relationship with mommy at birth. Then they begin to bring other people into their environment, daddy, grandma, puppy, whatever. And they begin to assimilate other people into their environment, okay? Until finally they understand their environment, the larger environment, and their part in it. This is the same thing that's happening right now with AI. We are adapting to it, which is a good thing. But we need to realize that we can adapt it, we can assimilate it, but that doesn't mean that we have to completely and totally 100% accept it and have it be the be-all and the end-all of every single course and every single thing that happens at the university. There's a process for everything, everywhere today, thanks to AI. You have to go to a portal for this. You have to sign on to that. I went on to the Geek Squad the other day. Okay, I hope there's nobody here from the Geek Squad. I need the Geek Squad a lot. And I called up, and they said, this is your artificial intelligence helper. I'm new at this, so please tell me the question you are asking. I wanted to say, well, my computer's not working, help me, but I couldn't know how to keep refining. Okay, but the point of it is that you no longer can speak to a person. You have to go through maybe 3 or 4 steps to do that. And we should be the steps that the students are going through. Okay, we should be the one to help them to define where they're going and what they're doing and what time is about. We don't want them to feel that they're left behind. We want them to know that they are on the cutting edge. They're on the cutting edge for one reason, that they can think. They can think. The other day, I had not one student in my class who could write their name in cursive. That used to be a sign of being an intelligent person, that you could write your name. I can remember my grandmother learning how to write her name. So we need to really give a lot of thought to how do we adapt, how much do we want to use this, in what context do we want to use this? Because when we ask AI questions, they don't understand the context that we're talking about. They only understand the question. They don't understand the context of that question in relation to a particular person, problem, or situation. And we need to be there to do that for them.
So one of the interesting aspects of AI for me is the fact that we are so much better, not just with AI and increasingly not just on our own, but together, right? And there's kind of the example from the world of chess where a good chess player coupled with an AI program can beat most really good AI programs. So humans combined with AI seem to be the magic combination. But the question is, what do we want from the human side of this equation? And it turns out, at least it seems to me, is there's this interesting AI paradox, which is that reliance on AI may destroy the very critical thinking skills we need to be good partners with AI, to use it well. So I think the challenge is not to view AI as the enemy, but to view AI as what needs to be set aside so that we're not relying on it to try to develop critical thinking skills, and to have rigor and real intense training and practice and exposure to conversation, argument in a pleasant, professional, respectful way, distinctions, how to reason critically. All those skills are just the beginning of prompting well, which is not a skill that has to be taught. We don't need to be taught how to ask questions. We need to be taught how to ask good questions, how to ask follow-up questions, how to interrogate the quality of the answers we get, how to critique the sources we get, how to push the AI into spaces where it's never gone in its initial response, how to look for inconsistencies, push deeper and deeper and deeper, and our responses get better and better and better. So the skill really that we need to develop are very much the humanities, the critical thinking, the philosophical, the reasoning, the challenging, the creative role, all that, not because we're trying to resist these tools, but because to use them well, we need to be good partners. And a really rigorous training as critical thinkers is, I think, at the backbone of that.
Both of the comments that were shared, and also when it wasn't shared, but was in the essence of what you were saying, the disciplinary subject matter expertise is all the more critical. And so, in addition to teaching relationship management and communication skills and things that AI cannot do, ethical judgment, is the ability to that subject matter expertise. So employers of the future are going to want two things. They're going to want graduating students that know how to use AI, and they're going to need subject matter experts in their domain, in their field, in their industry, and that combination that you were suggesting. And so the foundations of psychology and history and literature and program management, business analyst, right? All those core foundations, regardless of your major and your area of study, are going to be critical, because that's how you can know how to manage an AI tool well. That's how you know to be critical of the outputs, because you have that domain expertise that underlies it. And so you know when to question when an answer that an AI has given you is not quite right, and to go deeper and to go to the source materials that could support or refute what you're being told. And so those durable skills and the subject matter expertise are all the more critical in this moment.
Adding on to this, I think really what higher ed really needs to solve for now is just sharpening human judgment and critical thinking. I'm a little bit biased. I'm a two-time Stockton alum, so I think, our political science program does this particularly well. So thinking about some of these educational settings where students are deeply engaging, with literature on a particular topic, but also, giving them the opportunity to take ownership. I think it's a lot different when you have, a rote memorization type of assignment versus something where students have to learn collaboration, working in a group to present something and take ownership from start to finish. So another example, I also did the Stockton Data Science Master's Program, and what I really got out of that was, although we were doing a lot of stuff online and a lot of the tech tools, it kind of gave me the opportunity to dive deeper into areas that interested me, and within that environment, be able to take ownership of something end to end. I think the challenge that I see is when students are uncritically relying on these AI tools and they're coming into the workplace, I would say, I have about a team of 10 people at DCA, and I've been proud that I've been able to take some folks from an internship level and make them into permanent civil servants. But I think what I've seen on the flip side of it is I don't use AI when I review resumes. I've reviewed probably about 1,000 resumes in the last 2 years for some of the roles that I've had to fill. And I think the biggest disconnect that I've seen is these folks that are uncritically relying on AI to churn out cover letters and resumes. You get them into a one-on-one in-person interview and they just fall flat. And I think this is something that from a workforce development and from an educational standpoint, I think we need to intentionally be putting students into these situations. And a lot of this is just, making what's everything that is old is new again. I think the Socratic method needs to come back and be expanded more. And I think a lot of these tools, AI at the end of the day, it's just a tool. And if we are not thinking critically and being able to exercise good judgment in this sea of information, it's really just kind of an amplification of the problem that we've seen of the early to mid 2000s, with all of this misinformation out on the internet.
Thanks, and I'll speak on behalf of our political science chair here to say we're very proud of the work you've done. We'll move on to talk a little bit about the workplace, or a lot about the workplace. What are the most significant implications of AI for workers, including in private and public sector? And how can policymakers, employers, and educators collaborate to ensure that these innovations benefit rather than harm the workforce? Take it away, Labor.
Got it? Yep. I'll bite. Look, when we look at questions of transparency and accountability and so forth, I think we have to recognize that in some respects, the United States is way behind a lot of what's expected in accountability, due process. In America, we're an employment at will nation. The basic law is you can be fired for no reason whatsoever. There are protected classes on discrimination cases, but if you're not in a protected class and you don't have a collective bargaining agreement, you are totally at the mercy. Now, that context, you put in AI and extraordinary amounts of readily available data about individual people, 1,000 data points on everybody in this room, instantly available, the vulnerability for workers becomes just extraordinary. And you have to actually address that. You have, for example, now ICE using social media data to track down people to deport. Now that could be applied to campaigns against union organizing for the 90% that don't have unions now. There has to be accountability on that. They really, and there has to be due process. I think this actually puts us into the place where we have to do something we haven't done before in general, which is due process for things that affect workers on the job. And you can't just, it goes beyond just being voluntary. And the notion of workers having their own stake, going back to the National Labor Relations Act, where the union is distinct from the management, and they have a democratic process that not always works as well as it should, but to select their own representatives. That stands separate, and they have a voice. Again, now surveillance is a huge issue, and what kind of information they can have on you. And it goes beyond the workplace, too. I mean, the whole notion of unreasonable search and so forth has now just been delegated out to companies. There are companies outside of government that the police use constantly to get all kinds of data about people. And of course, you have China. You have cases where that's really extreme, but it's not so remote. When Edward Snowden revealed that the NSA was collecting all data, which is way beyond anything you can use without a lot of artificial intelligence to sort it out, which is why 3/4 of the artificial intelligence scientists 20 years ago were working for the big 5 tech companies, because they had so damn much information. What can you do with it? Well, that's part of what that is. So I think there's a real question there, and I'm going to come back with one more aspect of this later, but I put that out there. There really has to be a kind of a due process, actually democratic values in the workplace being made real in an institutional way.
I think one of the biggest challenges that I've seen in the workplace is if you look at a lot of these AI companies and vendors, there's a real divergence of interests. And we've touched on this in some of the earlier questions, but if you think about it, who really owns our data? And I think one of the challenges we see, particularly in the public sector, is some of these technology contracts are negotiated by non-technical stakeholders without having somebody that has that subject matter expertise at the bargaining table. And you end up getting these one-sided deals where public entities are negotiating from a position of weakness to have autonomy over their own data. And I think it's going to be a significant challenge over the next few years because, you know, if you think about it, if you purchase something at a grocery store, there's like that nutrition facts label. You can see the inputs and the outputs to it. A lot of these AI systems are black boxes, closed proprietary systems where we have to take them at their word that it's doing the thing that they say it's doing. And I think if you look at some of the stuff in the media in terms of some of the ethical concerns that have surfaced about a lot of these AI companies, we can't always take them at that face value. So I think if this is going to be something that's deployed where it has an influence on the overall quality of life of both the workforce and management, there's significant implications there. There's been concerns that have been surfaced, you know, with some of the applicant tracking systems for folks applying for jobs. A lot of it is it's a garbage in, garbage out type of thing. I think if you look at particularly AI bias, there have been multiple documented scenarios where law enforcement has used AI surveillance cameras to try to do like a facial recognition match on somebody. And because those AI systems are not trained on enough diverse faces and different cultural backgrounds, there's been folks that have been falsely flagged as, you know, committing a criminal act or doing something wrong where they get into one of these real dystopian situations. And I think it's just something that both the public sector and the private sector is going to have to continue to grapple with. And I think I would echo some of the concerns of my co-panelists, that due process and allowing people to not just be thrown into an autonomous decision-making loop is going to be really essential there.
Thanks. Actually, we're going to move to the last question. So I'll have everybody give your last word. As a political scientist and scholar of policy, it's a policy question. So looking ahead 5 to 10 years, what is one policy, institutional change, or investment that would most help public higher ed harness AI while protecting core public values?
I think in Senator Cryan's remarks opening us up, you know, he really emphasized the pace at which things are moving, and I can't emphasize it more. So thinking about a question on 5 years, it feels more like a 50-year answer, because I do believe that that's sort of the scale at which we're talking. And so just kind of having that mindset that it's, you know, very difficult in this moment to see around the corners. But one thing I can say in terms of an investment perspective, particularly for higher education institutions as well as industry, will be investment in compute. And not just in the fields that have traditionally experienced it or expect it, but in non-traditional fields as well. I think AI's implication for the research process and for scientific discovery is going to be massive. And so for, you know, traditional researchers that may not have had high compute costs or compute costs at all, we'll need to start to factor those in, and universities investing at scale for their faculty, I think. So that's sort of my one practical point. And then the second is investing in equitable adoption, and that means across all majors, across different institutions, making sure that from the workforce perspective, our underserved, underemployed communities and workers have an opportunity to participate in the AI moment so that we don't widen you know, technical divides the way other tech revolutions have done in the past. And so really centering that equitable adoption across our systems and co-designing what that looks like.
So we are in a sea change moment here. Things are moving so quickly, it can almost be disorienting. But I think public colleges and universities have a real role to play. And I think that role can look like creating opportunities to prevent some of these entry-level opportunities from disappearing. I think that's been a big source of anxiety. And I think if you look at, you know, some of the incentives of employers, oftentimes when they're scaling back roles or not having some of these opportunities, they're citing AI as that justification. And I think the role that universities can play with an investment would be, I would like to see an investment in human-centered design practices. AI has evaporated the barrier between how quickly we can think of something and being able to actually execute that and turn that into an app. So, you know, anybody can go on Claude or ChatGPT or whatever the tool of the day is and build an app, a website, or a system. And we have talked about earlier in the panel about what values we're instilling to those systems. But I think one of the most important investments that we could make is pairing up some of these students seeking entry-level opportunities with either nonprofits, small businesses, other groups in the community that universities are often kind of the anchor to through their institutional role, and marry that up with investments to really get these technologies deployed in a way that's going to ultimately create value for the public, and consciously making that effort to protect, promote, and preserve that social mobility ladder through those entry-level opportunities for recent grads.
I share all those views, and I think they're intriguing. One of the maybe very different sounding ideas here, but I think it kind of maps on to what we just heard from our two prior panelists here, is these new tools do hold a really interesting potential, which is to break down the divide between the humanities and technology. In other words, when we think about who's running a lot of these companies, they're often people who have some technological capability, who've built a company and then it's flourished and gone public and scaled up at extraordinary proportions. And so they're technologists who are now managing tens of thousands of people and making decisions about policies that affect all of us, from privacy to access and so on, and relationship with government on critical issues. And it's an interesting question, to what extent do people who have this technological background, do they have the skills, training in humanities, ethics, values to be making these decisions well, and why are they kind of at the seat of power at all these companies? And for me, the short answer is, to use a kind of a word from statistics, which is not my area, but it's orthogonal, which simply means it's unrelated, right? It's not to suggest that people who have a technological background don't have aptitude for value-based ethical judgments. It's just to suggest that their particular background, there's no necessary connection between that and what they're doing in these high-level management roles in these organizations that they've built with their technological skill. So for me, what seems intriguing is maybe to revisit the C.P. Snow divide between science and the humanities and suggest that maybe we need to break down that wall. Maybe the idea that we're X or Y, right, we're in one area or the other, needs to be questioned. Maybe we can use these tools to train and educate ourselves in new spaces and become creators. As Gavin said, tools like Claude can allow us to create new apps and tools. It goes beyond that. It can turn us into creators and experimenters in domains well beyond our narrow niche areas. And it just raises the interesting possibility, are we 10 or 15 years away from a world where we can challenge that divide, have products and services that are more individuated rather than made for tens of thousands of people, have all of us working on questions of science and technology, infusing that with our interest in humanity and what's worth pursuing, that kind of thing. So it's a very far-looking notion, I suppose, and maybe it sounds a little idealistic, but the idea might be to invite more of us into the creating space and to see us more as empowered by these tools to take our humanity into new and amazing places that maybe we couldn't before.
Well, I certainly agree with that. Before I go into my one policy thing that I really want to focus on, I want to do a caveat. We really do believe that this technology is of terrific potential value and actual value and so forth. You're not going to see the AFL-CIO opposing the construction of data centers, for example, whatever problems there are and how it's done and so forth, but Now, but the policy thing that I'm going to bring up is not necessarily in my AFL-CIO hat. It's in my hat as a grandparent, which is that my kids actually, my grandchildren actually see the 23rd century. And I'm going to point people to a New York Times article from yesterday, Mutually Automated Destruction, the Escalating Global AI Arms Race. This is selecting targets and so on and so forth. And the comparison is made to the Cold War nuclear arms race, where tens of thousands of nuclear weapons were stockpiled, enough to blow up the world endless times over. If that ever was set off, you would incinerate enough cities to blacken out the sun for years, i.e. no green plants. That's it, it's over. And we were on the edge of that. You had the doomsday machine where if the Washington or Moscow or the head of the military was decapitated, knocked out, it automatically set off all the armaments at once, the end. Now, that was the original automated, weapon system, okay? And it still exists, actually. I think we better take a good look at this, because whereas before there was this red line, you don't drop a nuclear bomb, with automated self-guided weapon systems, it's already being used now, and there's all this gray area, and there's no particular stop area. There's, as the article points out, there's one agreement, a voluntary agreement, a non-binding agreement between China and the United States not to use automated systems for nuclear weapons. It's non-binding, and Russia didn't agree to it. And Russia and America are the two countries that could end the human race, and China doesn't have enough yet to do that. They probably will under the, and I wanted to bring one more thing back about this with the automated systems. What are the automated systems being, the decision-making systems being fed on? We scrape the whole internet and so forth. Or what are the people who are mostly using them? What's the one word that really defines it? It's dominance. You hear over and over again, dominance. Whether it's international relations, dominance, military, or it's commercial success by being dominant. Where does that leave? If that's the fundamental underlying program in all of this, where is that going to leave us? So I think we need to stop and look at that now. That to me is the biggest policy. It's existential. We're a ways off from that, but again, as everybody points out, there's all this pressure to go faster and faster, not be left behind and so forth. I want my grandchildren to see the 23rd century. That's the biggest thing on my personal list before I go in the next few decades.
I think my personal list is, I'm sure that every single person in this room can think back on one teacher who said something or did something that made them love school or hate school. The relationship that you had with a teacher somewhere along the line has helped to make you the person that you are now. And I do think that teaching and education and the use of authentic pedagogy is really what creates success in individuals. I think it's a calling. I don't think everybody wants to do it. I think there are people who love education. They love doing the research. They love doing the writing. They love doing the publishing. But they really don't like correcting the papers. They want somebody else to correct the papers. There are now machines that can make up your syllabus. There are machines that can grade your papers. But the authentic work of being a teacher is really being involved with your students. This is a very special relationship, the teacher-student relationship. It's different from any other relationship. And those of us who have the good fortune of being able to do that and of choosing to do that have a major responsibility to do that. It doesn't mean that we turn away from things that will make our students better or our universities better. I teach at a D1 university, and we have a big-time basketball team. But I'm forever talking about why can't we be a D1 scholarly team, school? Wouldn't that be a better spending of our money, especially when you don't make the NCAAs? I don't know. But it seems to me that there are little things that every single one of us can do every single day. I know the provost is here, and so I don't know what the situation is here, but at my university, we have now turned a number of classrooms that used to be big rooms with all kinds of lectures now into smaller seminar rooms. Same space, just different kind of desks. One-on-one teaching makes all the difference in the world. And this is something that we can all do. We don't have to buy into Microsoft, more money with Google or whatever. We can do these things fairly simply. And I would challenge everybody to do that. I think you would have fun actually being able to talk to your students and walk and have a cup of coffee with them or whatever. This is, to me, what made my entire career. None of the other things that I accomplished. It's always being with the students. And so I leave that with you, and I hope that that will be the policy that each individual will take to themselves. And then it will just turn into your university and the work where you are. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much to all the panelists. Round of applause. So we are now on a very short break before our next panel. We have food, refill your beverages, and feel free to catch up with any of our panelists and continue the conversation. Thank you very much.
All right. Hello, everyone. While our panelists are getting settled, I am going to just introduce the topic for us. We're now moving into our second panel of the day. As we've already begun to hear this morning, partnerships are critical to the future of higher education. When done well, collaborations between public institutions and private industry can expand experiential learning opportunities for students, strengthen workforce pipelines, and drive economic growth across the state. This panel will take a closer look at how these partnerships are formed, what makes them successful, and how they can be scaled to meet New Jersey's evolving workforce needs. This session will be moderated by Michael Egginton, Executive Vice President of Government Relations at the New Jersey Chamber of Commerce. Please join me in welcoming our panelists.
Good morning, everyone. One more time, good morning, everyone. There you go, there's the congregation. Previous panel was great, but you stuck around for an even greater panel discussion. As introduced, I'm Mike Egginton. I'm the Executive Vice President with the New Jersey State Chamber of Commerce. I'm honored to be here in this capacity, moderating, because honestly, my analogy is, as far as education, workforce development, this is the Justice League of, representation right here. And I was actually on the panel here at Stockton last year, so really, quite honestly, an honor to be here to moderate. And with that, we're going to do the same thing, 30 seconds to just kind of introduce yourself, going down the row, and then we'll jump right into the questions because the clock is ticking. Aaron, we'll kick off with you.
All right, good morning. I'm Aaron Fichtner, president of the New Jersey Council of County Colleges. We function as the system of 18 community colleges in New Jersey, collectively serving 250,000 students and building partnerships to help make sure that we're driving the economy and opening up opportunities. So great to be here. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Mike Palladino, Provost and Vice President for Academic Affairs here at Stockton, coming on 2 years in a few weeks, about a 30-year career in higher ed, mostly in New Jersey. I'm a molecular biologist and geneticist by background. I've spent stints at Brookdale Community College, Monmouth University, Bloomfield College, Montclair State University, and very proud now to be at Stockton.
Good morning, everybody. Jennifer Keys-Maloney. I am the Executive Director of the New Jersey Association of State Colleges and Universities. I have the pleasure of working with 7 of the regional publics, including Stockton, and we affectionately bring the other ones along, if you will, almost as ugly stepchildren. So, great opportunity to be part of this conversation. The schools I work with are the backbones in their communities. They represent 50,000 students plus every year that are matriculated in the institutions, and in essence are what I often call the work engine or workhorses of the state when it comes to business and innovation and partnerships.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Joseph Youngblood, Chancellor of Kane Global, the Kane USA regional campuses at Kane Ocean, Brookdale, and then the Skylands. And I also oversee our strategic global initiatives.
Good morning, Michelle Sakurka. I am the President and CEO of the New Jersey Business and Industry Association. As we like to say, we advocate tirelessly for an affordable and regionally competitive business climate here in the state of New Jersey each and every day. But really at the heart of what we love to do each day is be the center of workforce development coordination between our businesses, industry, academia, and government. Very excited to have my colleague here who leads workforce development, Althea Ford, in the room today. And she'll be here when we finish to take any questions because I have to bolt at noon. So apologies for that.
All right, so we're really on a timetable. So I'm actually going to start with you, Michelle, and come this way. for the first question, if you could. So public-private partnerships in higher ed can take many different forms, as you all know. So from your perspective, what are the characteristics of partnerships that you value the most?
So it all starts really with, and we heard about this before, establishing a true relationship, and that takes time, right? This is not transactional work. We can get transactions done each and every day, but for real sustaining difference, we need to build relationships. In those relationships, we need really, really good collaboration, good transparency. We need to be responsive to each other's needs. And we need to come to the table open-minded, understanding that we won't always have everything that we want to get accomplished in common. And so we have to look for the things that we do have in common and leave the pain points on the side for a discussion later on when we've actually built the trust with each other to take on the tougher issues. And I know we're going to talk about our incredible partnership with the Council of Community Colleges on NJ Career Pathways. I think that is a beautiful example of collaboration that involves, everybody sitting up here with state dollars in order to push something forward that has a lot of energy and sustainability behind it.
Great. Joe?
Yes, one of the exciting things about the Kane Commission report of a few years ago, and I believe this conference actually dealt with that in great depth and clarity last year, is the respect that we have for the individual missions of each of the public universities in the New Jersey system. That is very different than many other systems. And with respect to that is our clear orientation at Kane around mission specificity and mission alignment to everything that we do. So when we look for partnerships, we are very keen on making sure that the alignment to issues of equity, social mobility, and providing pathways for students is an essential aspect of what those partnerships need to look like. So we have worked to make sure that we are engaged in co-design from a curricular perspective with industry partners. I think we heard one of the panelists on the previous panel talk about the importance of that. What that represents for us is a critical opportunity to make sure that we're linking faculty and students with those people in the real world who can create these employment pathways for the students that we're working with across a very diverse set of campuses that we now have, both as the Comprehensive Research University with major urban campuses in Union and soon to be in Jersey City University, but also more specifically what that means and how it speaks to the regionally specific context in places like Morris County, in places like Ocean County, and also Monmouth, given the work that we do at Brookdale as well. So that aspect of working with industry partners so that it's not just your kind of classic industry advisory board where I can call Michelle or actually go downstairs or upstairs.
We're in the same building.
We're in the same building. So when you talk about what that co-location represents for us around the issues and themes in this panel, we live it every day to make sure that we are designing curricula and programs that speak directly to the needs of industry. And that is essential for us, both in terms of authenticity for our students, for our faculty, but also it provides the balance that allows us to really direct this intersection of really leveraging the skills and the expertise of both sides. I wish we lived in a world where we could say that many of the faculty that we're recruiting are coming from industry. Typically, they are not. They're newly minted PhDs who are coming into our tenure track programs. They don't always bring the industry-specific perspective that's needed to create the kind of real-world experience that allows our students to translate immediately into industry when they leave. So having industry partners at the table who can leverage their real-world perspective, given that they bring the best of that aspect of their identities, and to work with our college faculty and staff has been a really important model for us as we advance these new ways of thinking about industry-university partnerships.
Great, thank you. Jennifer?
So in short, kind of echoing both with what Joe and Michelle have indicated, it's co-create, not just consult. So in essence, you're working collaboratively with industry partners. Because I work with regional publics, they're embedded in their communities. They know what their industry needs. They have begun that process at least several years ago in terms of the advisory bodies, but it's moved beyond that. And we're starting to see that occur in different ways, whether it's stackable credentials, whether it's applied learning opportunities, whether it's clinical experiences. Heck, I think in the world of the future, we'll see apprenticeship happening in a more dynamic way than we do today in a more traditional, four-year institutional context. And it's also okay to scale, assess, come back, and come back around. And that we're starting to see as well by way of pilots that are starting to pop up. It's also kind of, from an applied sense, also looking at research and how that can be interwoven in terms of the workhorse of the institution, leveraging the expertise of the research engine, and at the same time helping industry when it comes to their needs, whatever they may be. And that scale should also be thinking not just about their larger businesses when it comes to research, but also assisting the smaller or mid-sized businesses in the region. And because my institutions do that well today and have for a decent amount of time, I know they're able and capable, as Mr. Youngblood has indicated from Kane, they're able to do that on a more strategic way than maybe some of the other institutions that are larger across the state in terms of that application.
Great. Michael?
So you've already heard a lot about how to build mutually beneficial partnerships and relationships, and I do think that the trust is really important, in part because otherwise these partnerships are not worth the paper that they're written on in lots of ways. I start with looking at things like mission alignment, right? What is really at the core of what we're doing institutionally and what our mission is and the mission of the potential partner. What is that alignment? It could be for service, it could be for workforce development, it could be for financial benefit, it could be for reputation enhancement, community engagement. And that's really important in my view to produce truly deeper, sustainable commitments and partnerships that are not just dependent on one or two key people at the institution. I think a really strong desire to want to work with students and faculty and see and understand how that's mutually beneficial. What can faculty and students bring to the partner, and what can they bring to our relationship with our students and faculty? Willingness to experiment is important, right? Because sometimes it's going to be one step forward and two steps backwards. And what is their temperature to be able to do that? And the other thing I think a lot about from our perspective, because we're inundated with potential partnership opportunities all the time, as much as we're going out seeking those opportunities, is managing expectations and really being realistic about what we can deliver on as a university, so that you avoid that frustration and are very clear in those expectations up front. So, for instance, we get requests all the time, can you do this or can you work on that? We're not a Research One institution, and we have tremendous capacity and expertise among our faculty, and as you see here, incredible facilities. But there are times where I simply say, we can't work in that space because it's not who we are. It's not where we have great expertise. Here may be a space where we can work together if you want to do this, and I think that's very important to avoid frustration and to not overpromise as you enter into what you hope to be a long-term partnership.
Before I turn it over to you, Aaron, we were privileged to have you moderate the Workforce Development Education panel down at our business summit. I'm sure somewhere in your remarks you're going to talk about pathways that Michelle talked about and the great success there. So go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. This is really an honor to be on this panel. I look down and hear the great remarks, which I agree with. And I think about all the partnerships that we have already with all of you. The Pathways Initiative with BIA. Kane Ocean is an amazing partnership to help students at Ocean County College get a Kane degree without ever leaving campus. We've worked with NJ Askew on many things, including transfer, and clearly the partnerships that Atlantic Cape Community College has with Stockton are really top-notch. When we think about partnerships from our perspective, I think it's really important, I agree, trust, alignment, but it's also important that we're all focusing on a common vision. So we talk about how New Jersey has a incredibly highly educated workforce, and we do, and Senator Cryan talked about that. 58% of New Jersey adults have a post-secondary degree or credential. That's great, that sounds great, right? That also means that the other 42% do not. That's a lot of adults in New Jersey without post-secondary credentials, and I think it was clear from the AI panel that we're gonna have to do a better job of that. But we rank 10th in the country now in post-secondary attainment. We used to be second or third, right? Now we're behind Minnesota, we're behind Colorado, we're behind Washington. And so we are, I think our partnerships are best when they are relentlessly focused on helping more people get credentials that help them live family-supporting jobs, which is why we've joined with many organizations here and others to launch our Future Ready New Jersey Coalition, which is committing to find ways to get that number to 75% by 2040. That's 75% of the population having a post-secondary credential or degree that allows them to earn more than they would with just a high school diploma. And so from that, I think there are a lot of partnerships that we'll talk about, but it's really for us aligning our curriculum, connecting with partners to make sure our students are on a path to a job and a career that powers the economy, and working with non-traditional partners, which I'm happy to talk about. So great to be here with this esteemed panel.
Great, thank you, Aaron. And just another plug for you. And your team. You take that partnership to the next level and keep us in the loop, and BIA and other groups that are here, when we have those legislative initiatives that we have to show up at the State House.
Absolutely.
And make sure that it gets through the committees and stuff. So really appreciate all the work that you do there. All right, so what do you see as the needs of the rapidly changing regional workforce, and how can partnerships adapt to meet those demands? And we heard what the AI panel said. I have some opinion on it, but time's of the essence. So Aaron, we're going to start with you and go that way.
We're going back again.
We're going back again.
So I think from our perspective, we need to commit to making sure that higher education is affordable, it's flexible, and it's relevant. And so, if we're going to get more people the post-secondary credentials, we're going to continue to think about how do we do that in an affordable, thoughtful way. So affordability is obviously the word of the moment from the governor, but also I think really, really important in the reality. Flexible is really critically important too. We know that some students will go in a linear fashion from a community college to a four-year college and finish in 4 years and everything is fine, right? But I think we're all beginning to understand that we need to radically rethink higher education to make it more flexible, to make it stackable, so someone can come to a community college, get a workforce credential, go to work, come back, perhaps transfer here to Stockton, finish their degree, move on, move up, always learning. And relevant is critically important. And so we're focusing not only on making sure that people have skills that employers tell us they need, but also that they have the durable skills that I think are essential for the discussion we just had. That the world is going to look very different 20 years from now, and it's those problem-solving, critical thinking skills that need to be embedded throughout the work that we do.
Well said. Michael.
So I'm having a little bit of a full circle moment, realizing sitting next to Aaron, we started working together. It was, I believe, 20 years ago, Aaron.
Please don't tell everybody that.
I was 12 at the time.
I was 6.
When Aaron was at
maybe 14.
Aaron was at Heldridge Center, and we were working on the Department of Labor Workforce Development Grant for the biotech industry. So I'm going to take a little provincial priority here at our home or grounds of Stockton and give you a little bit more of a long-winded answer. So when I arrived here in 2024, beyond our academic programs, our primary approach to workforce development was through continuing studies. And this was the first institution where I'd been where we were losing several $100,000 a year in continuing studies. So something wasn't working. So we shut down the office to take a different look. And visiting with our local chambers and businesses, I kept hearing all the time, everywhere I went, we cannot find enough employees. Right. So I meet with all the casino executives and they say, we cannot find enough employees. What do you need? We need kitchen staff. We need people to turn beds. And I said, I'm sure you do, right? But that's not really what I can help you with at Stockton. So we didn't know what the market and the workforce needs were. Now, we have some academic centers here, like our Levinson Institute for Gaming, Hospitality, and Tourism. They're poised to support workforce development with the casinos, doing things like leadership development, teaching conversational Spanish for managers and things like that. That can have an impact. But I want to share a little bit of a sobering perspective that is driving what is our key strategy in this region, and it's around the healthcare workforce. And when I talk about that, I'm talking about healthcare education, mental health, and physical health and well-being. So regionally, the numbers are very sobering. Atlantic, Cumberland, and Salem County are among the 3 lowest in the state for health outcomes, almost no matter how you want to measure those. Severe disparities in health education, access to quality health care, socioeconomic challenges, high mortality rates and others, particularly among certain populations. And linger on this for a moment. In these 3 counties, residents of these counties have almost a 4-year lower life expectancy than residents of the rest of New Jersey, in a state as affluent and as populated as New Jersey. Higher rates of chronic illnesses, cardiovascular disease, diabetes, cancer, infant and maternal mortality, very high by some segments of race and ethnicity, and a very significant specialist shortage among healthcare workers. Some individuals having to commute 45 to 90 minutes just to see a specialist, right? It is a very different ecosystem in this part of the state. So I share that from a workforce development perspective because it's a major, major opportunity for us to expand our health sciences portfolio, and that's exactly part of our strategy. Nursing, occupational therapy, physical therapy, counseling, social work, speech pathology, and more. Partnering with Atlantic Care, Shore Medical, Cooper, Virtua, a key part of that ecosystem to be able to do that. Leveraging our centers and institutes. We have an outstanding center here for successful aging that runs through our School of Social and Behavioral Sciences. We just partnered with a group called We Care For that is working on training and micro-credentialing for aging, end-of-life, quality of care. I could share similar stories around the education ecosystem. I could share similar stories about what is starting to emerge in aerospace with the National Aerospace Research and Technology Park. And the last thing I would share, and this is to Aaron's point, our partnership with community colleges is a very important part of our strategy to provide pathways, not saying that everyone needs a degree, but in places where it makes sense, a pathway to undergrad and grad degrees we're very aggressive at. But think about business and entrepreneurship in the trades. So that young adult who may be 25 or 30 years old, President Joe talks about this all the time, who's a plumber or an electrician. Well, 20 years from now, they may not want to be crawling into tight spaces still as a plumber or electrician. They might want to be running their own business. And so an entrepreneurship certificate, as we recently launched, and stackable credentials like that who can help those individuals do that is also part of our strategy. So thanks for listening.
Thank you. Jennifer.
I could just say ditto, but I will echo just beyond what Stockton is doing. We see it with Kane in their programs across the state that are reflective of what they see in their region and really across the world when it comes to Kane Global. We also are seeing with TCNJ partnering on things like teaching, partnering on things like nursing because they're high need industries. Again, you know, the needs are great. I think as we've had the conversation around AI earlier today, it is shaping what and how we'll be training, but the soft skills, going back to what Aaron said originally, are still going to be important. What I mean by soft skills are communications, adaptability, durability. Those are things that these institutions have long provided and will continue to provide. You know, technology will shape us in the future, but as one of the speakers from the last panel talked about, it's a tool. And so how we shape it and how we train our workforce to adapt to the needs in their communities, as Stockton's doing, as well as the other institutions in the room, and how they're actually working with industry to address the individual things that are coming up. You know, Ramapo is actually partnering on advanced manufacturing because they recognize that as a need that the state has. And so they're saying to industry in their area, okay, you have this need. We recognize that it may be more trade-based at the beginning, but you may come back also to school in the future for whether it be business, accounting, or the like. You may need something related to business analytics. That's where stackable credentials come into play. As actually Senator Cryan began the day, education in the future won't look the way it did for the last 100 years, but it's okay. The idea of someone starting at a certain point at a community college, gaining a credential, whether it be in culinary arts, theoretically, and then recognizing that, okay, I may want to start my own business. That means that I need to take some classes. Then you recognize that you have some challenges with inventory control. Okay, what does that mean? That means that it may be helpful to do a small credential on business analytics so that I'm actually looking at my purchasing and resource trends more effectively. You may go in and out. Our workers of the future may go in and out of school in different ways, and our schools are adapting to address those needs every single day, and that's what makes them the powerful engines they are. When they talk with industry, when they talk with the actual communities that they reside in to address the needs that are happening on the ground, they are the most effective, and that's what makes them extraordinarily powerful as innovative engines in the state.
Thank you. It's really a fascinating question for us because in many ways, Kane has emerged and evolved as the other statewide institution, given the footprint that we now have across the state. That has enabled us to really have an understanding of some of these issues in the very unique and specific context of the 3 or arguably 4 regions that exist in New Jersey. But there is one centralized thread as we look at the workforce development issues, the need for agility. So that has prompted us to be much more meticulous in how we are looking at the changing demography in higher education. Our president, prior to becoming the president at Kane, was the commissioner of education for the state of New Jersey. So he was well aware of the changing demographics because they were already beginning to impact the K through 12 system in terms of the number of births, live births that we were having, and a whole assortment of other longitudinal data. And he understood that if Kane, as a traditional brick and mortar institution that was painfully only serving traditional 18 to 23-year-olds was going to succeed and survive, given what we anticipated the cliff would be, that we needed to rethink and reimagine who we were as an institution and the number of students and the types of students that we could serve across a broader developmental continuum. So he, I will say in his infinite wisdom, specifically recruited me because I had spent close to 20 years at the state's only adult serving institution that had a very specific and narrow mission around who it would serve, who it could serve. You couldn't even apply to that institution if you were not 21 years or older. So a very long infrastructure and architecture to support the varying needs of adult students and non-traditional students. Our president had the wisdom to understand we needed to really build the infrastructure for Kane to be a much more adult-friendly and serving institution. We did that. We were able to work again to make sure that there was a broader array of opportunities for students. Stackable credentials became an essential part of how we looked at what we needed to do to meet the needs of returning students, adult students. Suffice it to say, we've made great strides as a state in terms of our Some College with No Degree initiatives, but we're still lagging behind other states, and we still have about 1 million New Jersey residents who have some college and no degree. So we have been able to construct a new identity, which is the role that the global campus plays in supporting the needs of non-traditional students who are coming to us, who again, many of them aren't necessarily looking for, and they certainly aren't worshiping at the shrine of traditional baccalaureate degree educational experiences. So we have been able to construct programs and initiatives in ways that allow them to walk across the journey towards a bachelor's degree and beyond. That has become an essential element of the architecture that we've built into our programs to make it possible through things like prior learning assessment, credit for prior learning, how we're looking at a very strong assessment orientation, again, in working with industry partners. So we're taking the best of what they're doing in their training and development and allowing equivalencies to lead these students back into formal academic degree tracks. And that has, again, been an essential part of how we've been able to meet some of the workforce demands to make sure that they are also much more agile, because the need across all of those fields that you talked about for upskilling and reskilling is a constant demand. And again, the traditional academic structure doesn't always support that in ways that are accessible and affordable to students who, again, may not need at that time a bachelor's degree. But it provides the flexibility that allows them to go on this broader continuum. And then lastly, I think from our vantage point, the investment in making a global campus that is more than just about online learning, but building a larger ecosystem of access to credentialing, to micro-credentials, to skills, has been an essential part of a rapid growth that we're just so excited about at Kane. When the Kane Global Campus started about 5 years ago, there were approximately 600 students who were taking online courses and participating in this larger ecosystem of educational activities. That number, when we opened our doors in the fall, was close to 3,000 students in 5 years. So the market demand is there. The need for flexible, adaptive learning opportunities is absolutely essential. And then making sure that we're working with industry partners to meet the demands of the fastest growing population in higher education right now, which is not your traditional 18 to 21-year-old.
So from a systems perspective, this is exactly what we need at the horizontal of the post-secondary. So I'm going to take it to the vertical. And at NJBIA, we truly believe that this is a pre-K to post-16 and beyond type of solution, that even starting pre-K, we have to start with career readiness, because that's how dynamic the world of change is. And we need to rethink how we start our students pre-K and all the way up through the continuum so that they can then feed into this, because you only get the product that comes to you, right, from what comes before. And we need to reimagine that pre-K. And I keep saying pre-K, right, because today's children learn a lot more at a much younger age, and we need to be really, really intuitive and intentional on how we're setting them up for when they enter the formal system and what they need pre-K to be prepared, even to be competitive at kindergarten. It sounds crazy, but it is so true, right? And then the second piece of this, in a systems perspective, is there are so many, and to me, I think it's just an observation I've had over my years of experience, but there's so many folks that fall out of the system who we want to capture back in. Particularly, these tend to be, sorry guys, right, 18, 19, 20-year-old men to about 28, 30-year-old. They go in, they fall out. They go and get a job, and all of a sudden they're not on a career track anymore. But what they're doing in that everyday job and that vocation or whatever they have has value to it, and we need to find a way to recapture them and give them life experience credits as well, so they feel like they're getting a leg up to come back in the system. Your former institution does a great job at that, right? Thomas Edison University, at taking real life experience and turning it back into credit, so that we could say to a young man who's trying to get back into a career path, we're going to give you 10 credits for that because what you did actually aligns to what you need for that. And then you feel like, wow, I'm going in, I got a leg up here. Last thing I just want to say is, from the competency side, we cannot overly talk about the need for critical thinking. Right, as a core competency. And we talk about vertical skills, absolutely, but the most important thing is that we've got, again, this great horizontal group of competencies. This is what employers ask for every day. The critical thinking, the self-direction. There's a whole generation that only knew how to take directions and go, right? The self-direction, the ability to be a team player, the ability to communicate in a circle, the idea of you being engaged and not just talked at. And I love the whole idea of these small learning communities more, because I think that's what we need in order to develop that critical thinking. I'm a trained attorney, right? When young people say to me, I want to go on to law school, what should I study? What should I do, right? I was political science and German. Don't go that route. But political science, I will tell you, builds somewhat of your critical thinking. I say to folks, philosophy, math, and English. You need to think, you need to write. Yeah. And that was overly emphasized on the last panel, and I just want to put like a super exclamation point on that, because it's a really, really critical point of the discussion.
Without a doubt, and I'm going to do a 30-second me too, because during COVID, and we were all spoiled about doing the virtual and everything, a lot of what we do, the old school way, I can't do my lobbying at the State House virtually. I have to show up. That is half the battle. And it's so important that this generation understand the convenience of doing that on the computer is great, but you still have to interact with people to really get those skill assets. I totally agree with you,
Michael, the computer is transactional.
Yeah.
Live is relationship. I mean, you
without
can't build real relationship in a one-dimension world. You really need three-dimension world for relationship.
Right. So right now, as you all know, we're at the height of the FY27 state budget. Right now, the Trenton's on there bringing the cabinet officers in. Then it'll kick in high gear in May and June. And seems like we're always doing this cycle every year. Aaron, I want to start with you, because I think you can really encapsulate all the different budget hearings that we've gone to in Senate and Assembly. I call them the roadshows. So what resources and funding are needed to sustain these partnerships? So this is your pitch, if you're before the chair of the Senate and Assembly committee, to say, here's what we need to make it all work. Go ahead.
That's a great question, and it's all on my shoulders. No, but I have a great panel here, so I'm just gonna. Jennifer's got lots to add on this one as well, so we'll tag team this. I would say, just to circle back to something Michelle said, we are very happy that continued funding for our Pathways to Career Opportunities initiative is in the budget proposed by the governor, and we do think that is a model for funding the kinds of partnerships that we all need to engage in. And so just a little bit of plug on that before I come back to your broader question. Yeah. So what we've been able to do with the partnership with BIA, but with large numbers of four-year colleges, high schools, industry associations, the chamber, and others, is to invest in partnerships between our colleges, multiple colleges always at the table in our world, but always with other higher ed institutions and always driven by the needs of industry. We've developed 40 new pathways that are multi-level, that are stackable, new curriculum, that have really created some really exciting models of public-private partnerships that I think we need more of. So I think more seed funding and investment from the state in those kinds of creative, industry-driven partnerships are really, really important. And I think we've proven through our Pathways initiative that they are transformative. Because at the heart, again, this is all about partnerships, right? I think we need to continue to build those strong partnerships. It has been a long-standing truism of New Jersey that we underinvest in higher education. And so this is a flat budget for us in community colleges, but we're losing ground because of healthcare costs. Deferred maintenance is always an incredible issue. And I hope that we all can really talk together about how do we not only make the case for why higher ed is an incredible investment and ROI, but how we are all doing the hard work to transform our initiatives to make sure that those investments will really pay off. There's been a lot of change going on in higher education in New Jersey, really driven by all of us in this room. And so I think we need to keep embracing that. We clearly need to communicate that there needs to be a long-term, sustained commitment to investment in higher education. Right? How much time do we spend, Mike, every year doing the same thing? Right? We spent the last 2 years fighting for $20 million and putting our institutions through a lot of stress in the process. So I think if we can all in a single voice, we need a sustained and predictable model of funding and an open and transparent and strategic model of funding. So hopefully we will get there.
Before I move to you, Mike, you just had another flashback and a great advocate, and God rest his soul, he just recently passed, Steve Rose from Passaic County College, who was always there at those hearings advocating for the schools and saying the right things.
Yeah, thank you for mentioning President Rose. He served his institution as president for 30 years. He was the longest standing running higher ed leader, and he is missed. But as I think we all say, it's the power of the ripple in the pond will continue his legacy. So thank you for mentioning him.
Yeah, and I'd be remiss if I didn't mention this. Dr. Rose was a member of Bloomfield Board of Trustees and inordinately helpful to me personally and to us as we were going through that merger, and believed in the benefit of preserving the institution for students who had few other choices. So fantastic. So yes, we need dollars, and Jennifer, I know will speak to this, and we'll speak about things like unfunded mandates that are imposed upon higher ed, and yet we do want to pay our employees good competitive wages. But that's a challenge. I'll say a few words about leadership and strategy, and I'm flanked by people here who are working to build the ecosystems that support this work. I think that's really critically important. One, do we have the governmental and local leaders at the table with corporations, with institutions, with the NGOs, the nonprofits, the community organizers for a strategy? And two, do we really have regional economic development plans, and I can argue this across the state, but those that provide diverse, skilled job opportunities, and in this area, beyond the casino industry and tourism. And again, let's face it, I mean, there are some great beaches in this area, but if you don't like the casinos, you can go to great beaches up and down the New Jersey shore. You don't have to do it here in Atlantic County. And when we look at what is going to be happening with the gaming industry in North Jersey and New York, we need skilled job opportunities in this area. We need not only the mom and pop businesses, but we need the Fortune 500 type companies and the mix of small to mid-sized corporations. If you've never been to one of the P3 conferences, the Public-Private Partnership Summits, I'd encourage you to go. It's both inspiring and sobering. And so, for example, if you look at what's happening in Baltimore, and if you look at what's happening in places like Atlanta, the way the government officials, led by the mayor's office, for example, meet strategically every 2 weeks with university leadership, corporate leadership, hospitals, nonprofits, community organizers, and have laser-focused strategies on economic development, on higher education, on healthcare, you name it. It is making an inordinate difference. Now, that's not a political statement, but it is a political statement because we still work by a lot of home rules across New Jersey.
Okay. Jennifer, Aaron seems to have set you up. You know a little bit about the budget.
You know, it's funny, having lived it from different vantage points, the issues remain in some respects the same.
Sure.
It's prioritization of the things that will drive us forward that we need to use as our guide star. And we don't all the time. Because if you believed that, then honestly, higher education generally is one of the biggest investments. I'm going to go back to kind of the scary first, because I think it's important. Moody's has actually physically said that we are more fragile than our sister schools in other states similarly situated because we don't have strategic long-term investment by the state. There's the winners and the losers. There's the ebb and flow of funding. It's not consistent. And that consistency is compounded by something that honestly is sort of ridiculous, and that's deferred maintenance. Last year, we put a drop in the pond. That drop in the pond was $250 million. love it, great. But our cost just of emergent needs was over $1 billion. I repeat, over $1 billion. What does that mean when it comes to industry? It means that when they want to partner with us, we may not have the best facilities to attract them. And if we believe in an innovative economy, then this is something we should be investing in. Forgive me, I'm a little passionate about this. Because it is about the future. And the fight for the future, as Senator Cryan began, is really about having an educated workforce that can use tools like AI, like good knows what next. When we talk about healthcare, imagine some of the things that we're going to be doing just in terms of nanotechnology as an example. But to be able to capture that flag, we need to be investing. And that investment starts with deferred maintenance. Well, it actually doesn't start with deferred maintenance. It starts with operating aid, but it also is coupled by a look at our deferred maintenance, an investment in a long-term strategy of what it is we see as this innovative ecosystem that we need to support so that our kids, honestly, can start in preschool, and continue through 20. I'd go a little farther than you, just because I think the stackable credentials are where we're going to see people reskilled in the future. And so it's a continual, constant gardening of responsibility toward the fact that this is something that we see as our guide star as an important investment. And if we don't, we are fools if we don't embrace that errand, because we will lose in the competitive fight for the future. And gosh darn it, New Jersey is perfectly situated. We are in the right location, we have the right workforce, we have the right resources, and we have, honestly, a willingness to work with one another when we break down barriers. Now we just need a champion, and that champion has to not only focus on funding, but also bringing us together and being the cheerleader for why this is important. And I know Najasco can be part of that. The schools that I work with are definitely part of that. They look for that champion. And I look forward to hopefully a new administration that does embrace that. Sadly, I didn't necessarily see that fully in this budget. I thank them for the actual maintaining, but maintaining is not enough. We need to move forward faster. And if we don't do that, I refuse to be the fool, but we may end up being the fool.
Well, you're the right person for the right job. Joe.
Thank you for ending on that, because it's a wonderful framework for how I'd like to open my response to that, which is, as I have matured, and this may be a bit paradoxical, but bear with me for a minute, I have become more ambitious and objective, and yet more cynical. In the case of the latter, the cynicism is also based in empiricism. And one of the things that I can tell you about partnerships in general, but more specifically the industry partnerships that we think about when we're talking about higher education, is that altruism is not the best framework or value for a sustainable relationship. So we have to begin to rethink new shared investment models that bring diverse partners to the table with similar missions around impact, to be the framework for how we begin to stage these conversations around what mutually beneficial and reciprocal partnerships are and what they need to look like and what the shared return on that investment is. That requires a very unique framework for how we are designing these partnerships, what they mean in terms of each individual organization bringing their assets to the table in ways that complement, that do not create a competitive environment for how we need to partner, but that also allows us to tap into the multiple streams of resources that we need from public and private organizations and entities to be able to sustain the work that we want to start and that we care about. For us as higher education institutions, that means not just thinking that people see our wonderful students and want to make investments in them. Again, it's not a sustainable model. We have to demonstrate that we are bringing something to the table. We're bringing vision, we're bringing resources, but that we're also bringing our core enterprise as higher education institutions to the table to increase capacity in those organizations and also in the communities that we serve. That has been an essential element of how we have positioned many of the partnerships that came, both in terms of those that we have domestically, but also globally. And it creates, again, the framework that allows everyone to give their best around a shared vision and a shared mission that creates the model for sustainability that's so essential in these partnerships. The late Tina Turner, I think, said it best when she said, "What's love got to do with it? People will fall in love with you and they will fall out of love with you." So we have found that the business model, Michelle, is an essential aspect that has brought non-traditional industry partners to the table, but that also keeps them there, but allows us, again, in a much more neutral framework where everyone is a contributing partner to design programs for sustainability and for impact.
Very good. And speaking of bringing partners to the table, Michelle, I'd like to give you and Althea a plug. You've got a workforce summit coming up.
Thank you. Yes, we do. We have a workforce summit on April 29th, where we together are going to do our best to inform the next iteration of the master plan for workforce development for the future of New Jersey. If you heard Lieutenant Governor Caldwell, speak about this, he wants New Jersey to be the workforce state, wants to create the most jobs, ever, and the only way we do that is with a good workforce development strategy. So we're looking forward. We're not just going to have speakers, but we're actually going to do breakout sessions where we swap the current state, and we will come out with recommendations that will inform our third workforce development white paper, Education Equation 3.0. Speaking of partnership, I shout out right back some mutual love. The Chamber and BIA. So you can only imagine during a budget process how many issues when we advocate on behalf of the whole of the business community and job creators, and our higher eds are also job creators, right? You're not just educators, but you employ a workforce. You can only imagine the multiple conflicting, challenging areas in a budget. And we need to really think hard and fast about where we're going to expend our political clout during a budget process, because there's probably 10 things we want to advocate on, but we can't go in on those 10 things. Right. Year over year, the top of our priority, both these organizations, is the funding for sustainable programs for our higher eds, because we know for too long there's been a disinvestment here. I think the most frustrating part for us is policymakers want to say, well, you have another way to raise money, and it's called tuition. And then they come back and they slap you. They don't even, chide you. They slap you because your tuition's too high and you've created this thing called fees. Well, when they're not funding you, you have to find it somewhere else. Right. And sadly, what has happened nationally is we've become like the fourth most expensive state for post-secondary education in the nation as a result of that. Not because of the great programs that these folks are providing, but because of the disconnect between how we fund post-secondary education here in the state of New Jersey. So what we keep saying is we don't just need Band-Aids. We can't just keep throwing money at stuff. We need true reform. We need to go back to a table. We need a good stakeholder group where we say, what's the right way for us to learn from best practices in other places of how we fund post-secondary education, and how do we create a long-term sustainable plan toward doing that?
Right. So we're going to do a lightning round because I'm watching the clock and we have a hard stop at 12. So the last question was, what are some of the challenges that you face with partnerships? But I'm going to morph that because I see the glass half full, not half empty, if anybody knows how I operate. So Michelle, we'll start with you down. Lightning round, quick answer. But before you answer that, I want to morph it into, if we're back here in 5 years, how do we measure our success and what we're all talking about here?
So biggest opportunity is new administration, right? Anytime, it's like September when you go back to school, right? You always have a new, or New Year's Day. Right? It's a rebirth. It's an opportunity to look at things anew, and it's an opportunity for new administration to say, this is how I want to have my legacy for the future. Right. Getting in early with good policy recommendations, having a good seat at the table. And I will tell you that this administration, the Charlotte administration, is incredibly responsive to all of us sitting up here on the dais today thus far. I give an A+ in responsiveness, I give an A+ in transparency, and an A+ in process. Now, policy is yet to come, okay? Right. We have to see how this all shakes out. But we really have a seat at the table, and this is our opportunity to bring really thoughtful, intentional policy on how we have long-term sustainable change in this space that I think will be embraced.
Absolutely, totally agree. There's enthusiasm and hope all over again. And you've been right there, Michelle, and your team. I totally agree. Joe, what's a positive outcome of this?
I think having conversations about the need for higher education to reimagine itself is something that is the greatest challenge, the greatest asset, but also the greatest opportunity for us. And I'll use Kane again as an illustrative example. We are an institution that has been forced to relentlessly innovate, particularly with a president who is an extraordinary visionary with extraordinary plans for where the institution is going, even beyond the implementation dip of his first 6 years. And deconstructing who we are and how higher education has defined itself creates more limitations than I think we understand. So in the context of this conversation around industry partners, it has been a huge challenge getting people who have operated in a very traditional academic way to understand that industry does not operate at the speed of higher education.
Right.
Industry requires us to be much more nimble, much more agile, and again, to be able to innovate in a way that is more timely and associated with the demands of the rest of the world. So that requires us, again, to understand that we have to look at systems and structures and strategies quite differently if we're going to be able to engage in this innovation cycle and to transform at the speed of industry. So, for example, we are currently in the throes of a comprehensive MOU with a multinational billion-dollar corporation in the area of defense, particularly around computer science and cybersecurity. They don't really want to hear about the fact that some of what we are moving is going to have to require 3 levels of academic governance. You know, we have to find the way to respect why academic governance is critical, but to understand the need to be much more agile in how we respond to the needs of industry partners. So again, I see that as the greatest opportunity, but also one of the greatest challenges, and our resolve in managing that and mitigating some of the traditional rigid higher education structural issues is going to be an essential part to making sure that we are as nimble as we need to be to respond to the workforce needs, to industry needs, but to also help transform higher education.
Right. Jennifer, your optimism.
Exigency breeds opportunity, and we have the tools to make it possible to capture the flag. And those include not just strong institutions that are in this room and around the state, but also a diverse economy and industry partners who want to partner with us. So the vision for 5 years from now is breaking down the barriers, and we've seen a bit of this work happening both vertically in terms of high school through dual enrollment, as well as, you know, the articulation agreements that happen between community colleges and higher ed, but also breaking down the barriers between schools. I had a conversation recently around language programs and the fact that not every school has, as an example, a Mandarin language program, but a student wants to take it. How do we actually partner across lines? How are we thinking differently about your skill at this can be partnered with our ability there? The relationship with Thomas Edison and Ramapo is built on their backbone in terms of educating or actually assessing skill attainment and also building on the credentials that Ramapo has built when it comes to actual cybersecurity, amongst other things. Those breakdowns are a good thing, and exigency is pushing it. And so I look forward to the pressure cooker of the exigency hopefully getting us to think differently and more expansively about what it means to be educated. The push that we had in the last administration around kind of the idea that some college no degree, we can fix that. And we can fix that through the stackable credential. So the world shifting because of technology changes, because of, you know, actual population reduction, has made it possible for us to have to think really critically about what we do best and how we can do it better with someone. And that's what I would love to see, and I believe we are on the precipice of it.
That's very hopeful. Michael, your optimism for Stockton.
Mike, I'm at the same place in terms of this existential moment. And really, this is an opportunity that if we let this opportunity pass would be a huge mistake, right? Is some of the criticism of higher ed unfair? Sure. Life is unfair, right? And the reality of it is there's lots of things we can and needed to be doing better for a pretty long time. So on our end, there's lots of academic barriers as we talk about partnerships, whether that's, you know, the prospect in some people's eyes of selling out or diluting the educational experience, or we don't have time to do this work. We don't have time to not do this work. Right. And so the optimism for me is looking at the young men and women that we teach at Stockton with the liberal arts education and professional programs that we have. It's an opportunity to really leverage what that does and what those students can do in the workforce and with our partners in ways that I don't think we're necessarily always thinking about right now.
That's great. Aaron.
So I just want to start by thanking Michelle and NJBIA, Mike, and the Chamber for being strong advocates for public higher education in general, and as importantly or more importantly, pushing us to think differently about how do we meet this moment of making sure that we're preparing our students to be that skilled workforce. So thank you. And thanks to the team at Stockton, President and everyone here for hosting this really important discussion. I think there's a lot to be optimistic about. So I started by saying that we rank 10th in the country in our educated workforce, right? I don't think that's good enough, but I am confident that if we keep having these kinds of conversations, that when we come back 5 years, we're not 10th anymore, maybe we're 5th, and moving in the right direction. But it's going to take more of the partnerships that we talked about today. It's going to really require us to think about, as Jennifer said, how do we collaborate among institutions? How do we collaborate among sectors? How do we design a higher ed system that respects the roles that we all play and the partnerships that we all build? But I think we've heard today a lot of very strong, foundational, innovative ideas to build on, and I'm confident that we can do that.
Thank you. And I'll just end it to say partnerships are so important to all of us up here, to all of you. We don't move the needle without partnership. I always try to remind folks, it's not I did this, it is the we. It's working in these partnerships, the strength of academia, the business community, all our colleges and universities collaborating, because we all want the same thing. We want a great New Jersey, a great workforce. How many times we've heard different governors, since I've been around, since Jim Florio, say, great place to work, raise a family, and all of these individuals, I'm proud to say, work very collaboratively with all of our organizations and the work that we do in Trenton. So with that, how about a round of applause for our panelists? Thank you.
Thank you so much to our panelists for that engaging discussion. And you have teed up our next conversation perfectly as you started to talk about some of the policy considerations, because our next session will talk about the new administration's vision for higher education. We are going to take a brief 15-minute break so that everyone can grab lunch. When we will return, we will continue the conversation with a special discussion featuring New Jersey's Acting Secretary of Higher Education, Margo Challey. We'll be talking about the new administration's vision and what lies ahead for institutions across the state. So with that, please take this time to grab some food, and we will reconvene shortly. Hello again, everyone. Welcome back. I'll give it a second for everyone to get settled. I hope you all got a chance to grab some lunch and you're enjoying the spread. So I am honored to be joined by Margo Challey, Acting Secretary of Higher Education here in New Jersey, for a conversation about the state's vision for our public institutions here in the state. Secretary, thank you so much for doing this and taking the time.
Thank you so much, Alyssa, and good afternoon, everyone. Please enjoy your lunch. I certainly want to thank President Joe, who was just here. Yep, there he is. Thank you, President Joe, and your team for hosting us here today at Stockton. The conversation has been great from what I've heard so far, and I'm excited to jump right into our conversation. It's going to pick up nicely from where the last group just left off.
Absolutely. Yeah, they teed it up well. So I know we have a room full of stakeholders in higher education here with us, so I'm sure you're all familiar with the Secretary and her work, but I do want to give a bit of her background to get us started. So Secretary Challey was appointed by the Sherrill administration in January. As Acting Secretary of Higher Education, she is responsible for statewide higher education policy coordination and planning. Prior to this role, she spent 5 years with the New Jersey Higher Education Student Assistance Authority, or HESA, under the Murphy administration, including as executive director. There, she advanced efforts to make college more affordable and increase access for students across the state. So, I want to share just a couple of those accomplishments before we get started. Under her leadership, HESA awarded close to $1.4 billion in financial aid through grants and scholarships to eligible students attending institutions across the state. She also advanced strategies to strengthen workforce pipelines and retention in high-need career fields, which is, of course, very relevant to a lot of the topics that we've been talking about today. So I want to mention that because it's important to say her work has had a meaningful impact on students and families throughout New Jersey. So we're very grateful to have her here with us to share her perspective. So Secretary, thank you again. And to jump right in, I want to start with a big picture question, just sort of to lay the groundwork for this conversation. As we enter a new gubernatorial administration, what do you see as the top priorities for higher education in New Jersey?
Yeah, thank you, Alyssa. So, like I said, this will pick up so nicely from where the last group just ended their conversation. And after a lot of the comments, I wanted to jump up and say, I'm here, we're here. The new administration is here. We hear you, we are listening, and it's almost a little bit ask and you shall receive, right? Because I am absolutely committed to the engagement that we will have with all of our stakeholders in this higher ed ecosystem. And I get to follow the lead of our incredible Governor Mikey Sherrill, who has set the tone in all of her messaging since her inauguration, in that this is a state where we are going to provide economic opportunity for our families, a state where people can live and work with pride and dignity. And when you work hard, you're afforded an opportunity to get ahead. And she is very clear that higher education is pivotal in delivering on that mission. So that's where I get to begin, and where we expect to take this vision over the next 8 years is to reach, retain, and ready our New Jersey residents. And that means we will continue to blanket the state in awareness of the world-class education right here in the Garden State at our institutions. We need to let our folks know they don't have to leave. In their backyard, they will find their fit at a 2-year or 4-year public or private institution, and that is absolutely critical. I mean, one of the other, it's all about access, right? We need to let folks know there is an opportunity here. And I loved hearing about the non-traditional path. We are absolutely committed and focused on our some college, no degree population, just under 1 million residents in New Jersey who have some credits or are missing just a few credits to walk across the stage and graduate. And that will also help offset the demographic cliff that many folks in this room have been anticipating, in that our New Jersey born high school students, that number has gone down and we're experiencing it now. However, we have these lifelong learners, these adult learners who are ready to come back into our spaces. And we can't lose sight either of the domestic migration into New Jersey. There are incredible business sectors here in New Jersey, and that includes tech, pharma, of course, the new Netflix and studios for Monmouth and Bayonne. We are bringing Hollywood to the East Coast, and those workers will come and bring their families, and their children will go to our #1 public education system, K through 12, and then we will recruit them into our institutions. So that is critical to let them know what the options are here and what the resources are available. And then once we have our folks inside our doors, we need to retain them. The supports that the state can offer are absolutely exceptional, from our Educational Opportunity Fund to our financial aid, to our telemental health supports, statewide free programming for our students 24/7, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. They can hop online and talk to a professional counselor while they're pursuing their academic journey, because we know those are the barriers that people face while they're in school, the persistence of it all. But the retention focus of mine certainly starts with the students, and that's what I just mentioned, because pretty much everything coming out of my mouth will be student-centered and student-focused. But we can't lose sight of the institutional health either, the financial, fiscal stability of our institutions, because we can offer all these support services to students if they don't have a campus to return to, if they don't have a place to come and pursue those studies. So I am equally committed to both the students and institutions having the resources they need. And then, of course, the readiness component, which is what we're really talking about today. First, readiness for college, and we have programs like Gear Up that start with our babies in middle school and get them college ready, but specifically career readiness. So after we've done the work, we got them in the door, we've supported these students, and then we are having them ready for jobs on day one after graduation. And to accomplish all this, this is the sort of bat signal you all were talking about at the prior panel, and I've seen it and heard it, and I am responding to it. I'm thrilled to say we are going to take certainly the next few months, this first year, to revisit our state plan for higher education. And that will include the folks in this room, the leaders that the folks in this room know, our students, from institutional leaders to various stakeholders, champions of student success. Because the last time the plan was issued was in 2019. That was the before time, ladies and gentlemen. A lot has happened since then, from a global pandemic to upside down, back up, and upside down again, and turning around every which day of the economic situation globally, quite frankly. And the shifting trends in workforce needs, industry needs. And so to prepare our students to enter our institutions, thrive while they are there, and then be ready for the workforce, because that's how we're going to contribute to the community and the economy in New Jersey as a whole, is through continuing to ensure we have the highly educated, highly skilled workforce right here in New Jersey.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. And it's wonderful to hear that there's a plan to revisit the strategies around higher ed. I know that we're still in the early days of the administration, but as the plans begin to crystallize, how is the administration thinking about the role of higher ed in its broader economic and workforce development plan?
Right. So this goes to the fact that certainly Governor Sherrill and I know how incredibly foundational our institutions are to preparing the workforce. And I feel comfortable looking at my data notes here with this. Can I call us a group of nerds? I think we're all having this policy conversation over lunch. This is a safe, nerdy space. Okay. Georgetown Center on Education and Workforce latest research, one of the many studies that continues to reinforce that the high-paying jobs will favor high levels of education and training, specifically associate and bachelor's degrees. And the best stat we have, this is the stat, and you can all go home with this and tell somebody else and show off your nerd chops. But in New Jersey, those who earn an associate's degree can expect to earn $1.5 million more in earnings over the course of their lifetime compared to their colleagues who have a high school diploma as their highest credential. And for those who've earned a bachelor's degree, it's $2 million more over the course of their lifetime. So we cannot lose track of that quantifiable return on investment. And when there are talking points to say that we've hit the paper ceiling or higher education, post-secondary education is no longer worth it, we need to stop that immediately, that conversation, and now you have the data to do it. So this is an opportunity, and you'll hear me keep coming back to this when we kick off the interactive, transparent convenings to zhuzh up. That's what I do with my hair. Zhuzh up our state plan for higher education. To make sure that we are producing graduates that are adaptable. I heard agile earlier this morning. We are hearing that. We need to make sure that they can think critically and find solutions for the complex shifts in industry right now. And we are prepared to work with everyone who is committed to that goal.
Thank you for sharing those stats on lifetime earnings. I think that's an important point to keep driving home. And Senator Cryan mentioned it in his keynote address too, that we are at a time when people are starting to question the value of higher education, but we have the data to show that it really is the path to a better life. And public institutions in particular serve as vital engines of upward mobility, especially for underserved students. So yeah, thank you for driving that point home even more. But we do know there are cost barriers, and we are grappling with rising student debt and ongoing concerns about affordability generally in this economy. In the Murphy administration, through your leadership at HESA, you've demonstrated your commitment to reducing some of those cost barriers and increasing access so that more students have these types of opportunities that change lives. Can you share some of the ways that you'll continue to work on college affordability in this role?
I love this question because it allows me to talk about the work over the last 5 years and what will continue. And I know our colleagues both from the Office of the Secretary of Higher Education, OSHE, and HESA are here today, which just continues to demonstrate our ongoing partnership between these two agencies as we move forward in this administration. Yes, we've done a ton of work with the Community College Opportunity Grant and the Garden State Guarantee programs that were launched under the Murphy administration. These are last dollar programs that have a commitment to a tuition-free promise for families with household incomes up to $65,000. And that is an incredible, predictable pricing mechanism to discuss net cost. Net cost is critical in these conversations for students to know what they will need to pay at one of our institutions. And the data, more points, so here we go. Actually, the student share is down, 40% is still 40%, but it is down to 40% from 58% in 2017, just before the beginning of Governor Murphy's administration. So that is work that we can applaud, and I thank everyone in this room for helping to advance those efforts. And I also want to thank the institutions who have done their fair share of trying to control costs for students and families as well. Because actually, when you consider for inflation, the data shows that tuition and fees for full-time students is lower now than it was 10 years ago. So that is a testament to our institutional leadership as well for their incredible work. But the pressures continue, right? Because it's not just tuition and fees, it's the housing and the transportation and working part-time sometimes for students. And that is where we have an opportunity to focus on predictable and transparent funding for the institutions. So again, this is what I was talking about, that twofold retention part in working with institutions, because the more clarity and predictability they have in knowing what the funding will be from the state of New Jersey, the easier it will be for the institutions to provide a net cost, transparent pricing for students. And the governor is aligned in addressing these concerns as well. I mean, this might seem tangential, but I find it incredibly adjacent, related, actually, when she just directed transit to listen to surveys and feedback and make sure that riders are being heard throughout the NJ transit system. And at her press conference, you had an assemblyman talking about how when he was taking transit, he would be late to class, going to college part-time. And so it all plays together. It wasn't a press conference about higher education, but it absolutely impacts our students in this space by addressing an initiative like making sure we are delivering through transit as well. And when we go through the state plan process, I am absolutely committed to making sure we find the sustainable funding pathways to the institution, and that will include quite a bit of partnership with industry as well. It will be a government, industry, institution collective.
Well, that's a perfect segue, because I did want to switch gears to partnerships, which we, of course, heard a lot about on our previous panel. New Jersey has increasingly looked to partnerships between institutions of higher education and private industry to support research, innovation, and workforce development, which we heard so many examples of. From your perspective, what makes a public-private partnership successful, and where do you see the most opportunity for these collaborations here in New Jersey?
Yeah, this is the question, and we could talk about this until the end of the afternoon for sure, because I do have some success stories already and examples that I want to share. But public-private partnership is what we need to be saying to ourselves as we fall asleep every night. Public-private partnership, public-private partnership, because there is an opportunity for huge corporations right here in this state to partner with institutions and walk completely in the same steps as the institution to ready our students. So what kind of skills does the healthcare system across the street need? Let's find out exactly. Let's incorporate that into our curriculum, into our programming, perhaps into our facilities. There is an opportunity, there is an incentive for these businesses to invest in these campuses to help say, you know what, if you're going to prepare the next cohorts of nurses or physicians or other healthcare technicians on your campus, we are incentivized to help create the resources for that. And, I know right here, maybe Michael spoke about it on the last panel, the Aerospace Innovation Center, which brought together National Aviation Research Park, the Economic Development Authority through the state, industry partners, and institutions like Stockton to align state, academia, and regional infrastructure to accelerate talent pipelines. This is what is, yes, you were talking about this, right? Yeah. This is exactly the type of role model programming, the type of model policy and program that can inform other initiatives, because the results are triple-fold, and it all starts with our students. The students are prepared with real life hands-on experience in these sectors. We are scaling out existing infrastructure to be statewide, and we get to turn the work-based learning into degree pathways. So that is what's absolutely critical. That helps with the persistence while students are right here on campus.
Yeah, we've talked a lot today about the role of higher education in preparing students for jobs of the future, technology, healthcare, clean energy, all of these future workforce needs. But beyond training the next generation of workers, institutions of higher education are also developing citizens. We really aim to develop well-rounded individuals who are prepared to go make a difference in their communities. And it's perhaps more important than ever because, as our panelists on the AI panel pointed out, it's humans who are going to shape the values of these tools that are going to be a big part of our future. So how can higher education better prepare students to be informed, engaged citizens? What is the institution's responsibility in that regard?
Yeah, on the one hand, I'm sort of glad I missed that AI panel. I am a little afraid. I know it's not coming. It's here. We're in it. I am personally always the last to embrace the technology because I want to make sure it is at a space where it is ready. I'm sure this came up this morning, the ethical implications of AI and how we want to make sure we're using it the right way so that it's not dangerous and that we have actually educators are informed on how to use it and then can teach our students from K through 12 all the way through the higher ed pipeline. But there's a handful of topics to talk about here actually. And the students at our institutions, at your institutions, come here to learn not just the book learning, but in this critical crossroads right now where education is changing with AI intervention or they're always listening. So what we need to do is break out of the algorithms, right? And I'm shocked there aren't even more people right now on their phones while I'm speaking because we're connected to the phones. They know what we're looking, what we're searching, and we need to break out of that to continue to encourage critical thinking and engage with point of views, different perspectives, both from our student peers and the faculty mentors, and participate in diverse community to be ready for the workforce. I can't tell you how many associate attorneys I was interviewing at a law firm, and I said, oh my goodness, this is a grown adult who has never spoken to another adult before or dealt with HR or make eye contact. And this is really scary because they will need to be in court advocating on behalf of clients. And so there is a disconnect between that development and ensuring that we have safe, secure, and inclusive campuses to foster this diverse thinking is really what we're all here for. But going back just a little bit as well to the other partnerships, it's by taking people out of the phones, out of the bubble, out of the algorithm, and into these real world spaces, they are the most prepared candidates for the workforce. And there's such a nice mix of examples that I did want to highlight, not only because some of the folks are in the room, but the New Jersey Council of County Colleges developed the first registered machine learning apprenticeship with the AI Hub. That is an incredible opportunity for our students and creates affordable and stackable credentials. We have the Hudson County Community College, which is partnering with a woodworking company to provide hands-on experience for students pursuing an associate's degree in applied science and advanced manufacturing. And we can't lose sight of that either, right? It's not just about there are so many skills you gain from the liberal arts education, critical thinking, solutioning to complex problems through collaboration with peers, being here together in this incubator of thought and nerdiness, as we've demonstrated today. But the hands-on component is absolutely critical, and we can't lose sight of the advanced manufacturing. And another wonderful opportunity of public-private partnership here in the state of New Jersey is also on the cost side, and a little bit of altruistic thinking. I think Joe left, the Pay It Forward program, which is a testament to collaboration through multiple state agencies, which is a hurdle unto itself. So it's OSHI and HISA and EDA and Department of Labor all working together to issue these no interest, no fee student loans in specific high need in demand sectors like healthcare, HVAC, there's a whole bunch of radiology and radiographical classes at county colleges up and down the state. And recipients of these loans will only have to, they're income-based repayment, and they only have to pay back for 5 years, so long as they're showing proof of work, proof of income. And after 5 years, any remaining balance is forgiven. Whatever they pay back goes into the fund to pay it forward to the next cohort. But in addition to all the state agencies, the Governor's CEO Council, which Governor Sherrill will continue to engage and work with, and includes leaders from Johnson & Johnson and Merck and these massive corporations, they are donating into this fund as well. So the funding comes from both the state and the private sector. These things are working, folks. We have data that shows the beneficiaries of these are finding high-paying jobs, and they get the supports they need, so they are not outright drained on day one in paying back these student loans again because it's on an income-based repayment plan.
So a bit before we jump over to talk more about funding and some of the things that were mentioned on the previous panel, I did want to ask about something that was a topic of conversation at last year's conference about the outflow of high school graduates here in New Jersey. So we know that New Jersey heavily invests in educating students from K through 12, yet many of those students leave to attend college out of state and often don't come back. You mentioned this earlier. You were the first time we're mentioning this today. So I do think it's important to touch on this at today's conference. But are there any strategies the administration is thinking about to incentivize New Jersey high school students to attend college here, build their careers here, and ultimately, grow our workforce and economy?
Okay, I'm glad I have an opportunity to talk about this. And I'm going to talk about this in very much Margo style in how I talk about things. I challenge you and I say clickbait. This outmigration conversation has to stop. Here's the reality. 60% of our high school students stay in state. Those who leave for very specific reasons. It's a program of study, and you have to remember, or personal needs. There's a support programs, maybe at an institution, but you have to remember that this is a high-income state, and many folks have the means to leave, and they will leave. But continued investment through financial aid and aid to the institutions will set up our colleges and universities to be competitive and continue to recruit not only from high school, but also these lifelong learners, these adult learners, these returning learners, to stay right here in state. Also, of those who leave, 78% actually come back to live and work in New Jersey. I'm one of them. I did not know when I was a high school senior that I was going to have this job, and I did go to college out of state. I followed the money. I had a full scholarship to go, and then I came back. I came back for law school, and I came back to live and work here. So there is that positive data as well. We can't just say we're losing folks, and we certainly shouldn't call it the brain drain, because we have incredibly gifted, skilled, and educated individuals staying here in state and continuing to work for our companies and businesses right here in New Jersey.
Yeah, I think New Jersey has so much to offer, so it's very easy for us to make that pitch and have those students come back to the great state. Moving on just to talk a bit more about funding, it's of course probably the elephant in the room. I think everyone is fully aware that institutions of higher education are facing a challenging fiscal environment. How is the state thinking about long-term financial sustainability for institutions of higher ed? I know, you heard some of the things that were mentioned on the previous panel, unpredictability, deferred maintenance issues. What lessons has New Jersey learned from recent financial challenges at some of our institutions, and how are they thinking about this going forward?
Yeah, this you're right. This is the other conversation. And so let's have it. We can start today, and we'll continue to have it as we revisit the state plan. But it's another incredible partnership that we can highlight, which is both the executive branch, our agencies, and the legislature. So you're right. There have been some institutions that struggled financially and are working their way through mergers right now. And as a result of that situation, the legislature authorized our office only recently to be able to review, it's actually financial assessment and risk monitoring, FARM is the acronym. And this is a tool that our office has now to review institutions' financials, to get line of sight into any potential risks. And this authority gives us some tools to be responsive to those findings as well. For example, we can implement, dispatch, invoke, start, assign, I'll get the verb right, a monitor to monitor the health of the institution. And we can ensure that if an institution is at greatest risk, they have to put together a plan for their students, a teach out plan, a break glass in case of an emergency, partnership plan, so that the students, again, I come back always and start with students, have an uninterrupted academic journey, right? So if a school decides that it is going to close, the students are prepared, and we are accountable to them. We also have right now, actually in this current fiscal year budget, we received an appropriation to implement a study. And we are working with national researchers to actually understand the national and New Jersey specific landscape for alternative strategic initiatives throughout the state. I did not say M or C, the merger or consolidation word. I used alternative strategic initiatives, right? Which is critical because it will help us learn how to further improve our FARM, that financial oversight process, and shepherd institutions through the support they need with these additional insights and findings from these experts. So I actually want to thank the team that's here today because they are leading that initiative and it is underway now, and that will take place over the next year or so. But again, it's collaborations among and within institutions in multiple sectors. That's critical, right? There are other examples, and Jen talked about it earlier, the Ramapo and TESU agreements to make sure programs and offerings are available to the students at the different schools. We're going to look at things like shared services. We want to unburden the institutions as much as possible. So this is the conversation we are going to spend a lot of time on as we move through our plan.
Thank you. And I'm mindful of the time here. I know we're approaching our limit, and I do want to end on a forward-thinking question. But really briefly, before we get to that, I think another sort of elephant in the room are the federal dynamics that we are grappling with. Federal actions around higher education are evolving quickly. Recent changes to federal loan repayment, changes to professional degree classifications. I'm sure you're all aware of some of the things that are happening. So what implications could these have for New Jersey institutions? And very quickly, how is the state navigating this sort of uncertainty?
Uncertainty. Has anything changed since this morning? Since I've looked at my phone, since I left it at the table and walked up here? No, it's not funny. It's actually quite serious how rapidly the landscape is shifting both in policy and funding from the federal level. But we are consistently monitoring. We are engaged with institutional leadership. For example, we know this week the negotiated rulemaking is commencing on the accreditation reform, overhaul, whatever this will look like, and we will follow that very closely to make sure we can support our institutional leaders. I certainly cannot sit here and speak or speculate onto what will come next from the U.S. Department of Education, such that it is. We are also prepared to watch this upcoming academic year, and I know the HESA team will be monitoring quite closely the impact on the federal loan caps as a not so much a plug, but a reminder that the NJ class student loans administered at HESA can be used for both undergraduate and graduate programs. So that is a resource right here in state that we have. But we will also continue to work with our partners in the Office of the Attorney General. AG Davenport is quite the force, and we will continue to make sure we fight for the funding that is appropriate to our institutions promised by the federal government. We will continue. Just recently we saw success. There was a new directive from the feds for institutions to submit certain data through iPads. So this is their national data set about admissions data. And frankly, the schools aren't prepared for it. There was a deadline of a few weeks ago. It's been extended. And right now there is a preliminary injunction on the 17 states that filed that action, and New Jersey was part of that. So New Jersey has been, both under former Attorney General Plotkin and now Jen Davenport, in leading the defense of what is owed to and what is appropriated to New Jersey. In terms of looking ahead, right, we want to talk about the success of all of this. And I like that last question about what was success look like at this conference in 5 years. And it is certainly the outcomes. I don't want to call it short-term at all, because enrollment is absolutely critical. But enrollment is the first step, like I said, and then it's making sure the students actually succeed and obtain their degrees at our institutions and then thrive in the workforce and are able to provide for their families in New Jersey while covering groceries and gas and everything else, because they've been educated and trained and now working here with pride and with dignity. And I know that is my goal, and that is the goal of institutional leadership, and that is the goal of Governor Sherrill as well. So she will help us navigate these somewhat uncertain times, but we have a commitment here that can overcome that.
Thank you for that. Yeah, we really wanted to end on that positive, forward-thinking note and talk about, what success looks like for higher education here in the state in the next 5 years. So I appreciate you sharing that vision that, it's for students to thrive here in New Jersey at our institutions. Any final thoughts you'd like to share as we wrap up?
I really thank everyone. I guess I can't keep saying this. I spoke at Rowan recently. I said, this is my first public presentation. This really is my first public presentation since I was recently confirmed. And I'm so thrilled and overjoyed to take on this responsibility in this role. It is a responsibility. It is a ton of work. I am looking at President Joe. I am looking at the Jens and the Aarons in the room and all of the partners and collaborators and co-conspirators in the room who will work with me and my team to make sure our students are safe and healthy, our institutions are fiscally safe and healthy, and it's not, I guess it might sound cliche, but I think someone was asking for a cheerleader from the administration to be the point of contact, to be the wrangler of the cats and all of our different priorities that we have in higher education, which of course mimic the state as a whole, right? We have immigration issues we are concerned about. We have economic issues. We have labor issues. We have, when I say issues, I mean topics, right? These are all the things we need to address as we revisit the state plan. And there's an incredible team at Oshie and HESA that's going to help us with this in partnership with all of you. So thank you very much for this opportunity today to finally get this out and share it. And you'll be hearing quite a bit more about this and from me and the team over the next few months. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretary. Thank you so much again to Secretary Challey for spending the time with us and talking about these important topics. And thank you all for being here and having this engaging discussion with us. And what I would encourage everyone to do is continue these conversations in your network so that we can make sure that the value of a public higher education here in New Jersey is communicated to all of the stakeholders. So thank you so much and take care.